I'll call the meeting to order and want to welcome everyone to night 3 of budget deliberations. Again, want to thank everyone that's watching virtually tonight, and especially those that have provided feedback through this process. We really had a significant engagement during the virtual open houses through Let's Talk CK and deputations each night so far. Again, those are really important to this process, and we really want to thank everyone for providing that feedback. So far during the deliberations, we've really had some healthy debate and discussion. I expect that to continue this evening. I think it's important to note that this is the last year of our term of council, or our last budget process, and that we ensure that as we make some final decisions tonight, that we don't saddle the next council with any undue challenge. With that, again, I encourage everyone to bring their best effort tonight. We'll get through the rest of the tabs. We'll entertain any motions from the floor after that, and we'll make sure that we don't leave any stones unturned. With that, I will pass it over to Steve for some opening remarks and some follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So my name is Steve Brown. I'm the Director of Budget and Performance Services. Over the next several slides, I'll provide a brief overview of the changes made to the draft budget during the first 2 nights of deliberations, provide a comparator to other municipal budget increases, and review infrastructure investments and budget increases versus CPI during this term of council. So the draft budget was presented to council on January 12th with a proposed 4.74% increase. During the first 2 nights of the budget deliberations, the budget committee has made several decisions, which has brought the proposed budget increase down to 2.99% as we start our 3rd night of deliberations tonight. There have been several reductions to our investment in infrastructure, removing the $550,000 towards underground infrastructure, $676,000 in lieu of asset divestment, and reducing the inflation on the asset management plan to 3.3% from the proposed 4%. Both the transfer to the capital budget and the transfer to the assessment growth reserve have also been reduced by $650,000 each. Over the last several months, Chatham-Kent has been undertaking the budget process, while some of our neighboring communities and comparison municipalities have approved their budgets. A few examples of the approved budgets are Windsor at 1.86% and London at 2.8%. Greater Sudbury, which has a similar geographic and rural urban mix as CK, passed a 3.1% increase. In Essex County, Lakeshore and Leamington, both lower tier municipalities, passed a 2.4% and 3% budget increase respectively. Since 2019, Council has contributed over $16 million to infrastructure through the budget process. Of this, around $8 million was provided through other funding, such as expiring debt and senior government, and around $8.5 million through property taxes. As of the current stage of our 2022 budget process, the allocation of new property taxes to the AMP is only $96,000, or 0.06% of our property tax increase. The tax-based funding is comprised of a portion of our 1% AMP allocation, additional funding directed at storm sewer, and inflation. The average construction inflation over this term of council has been 5.3%, equating to a required increase of almost $12 million just to maintain the status quo within our existing plan, and does not include the additional 1% funding and 0.04 in lieu of divestments. With these items included, council would have needed to contribute $21 million versus the $16.4 million over the council term to meet the council-approved asset management plan requirements. The 2022 asset management plan discussions with council will take place this spring, where the funding deficit will need to be addressed. This graph shows the council-approved tax increases. 2022 is as it stands today, each year over the term of council compared to the council-directed budget target. The budget target is made up of the prior year's CPI, an additional 1% for the asset management plan, and any previously approved council additions for infrastructure, such as the 0.04% in lieu of asset divestment and increased funding for storm sewer. For example, in 2022, the budget target of 5.13% is comprised of the 2021 CPI of 3.4%, 1% towards the asset management plan, 0.4% in lieu of divestments, and 0.33 for additional storm sewer funding. The average construction inflation over the term of council is 5.3%, which is significantly over the 2.08 operational CPI for the same period. Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Next item we have, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest for this evening? I don't. Oh, Councillor Harrigan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to declare an indirect conflict with item number 172 new in the package that was sent to us via email regarding the CKHA grant, and to share that I have sought advice about this item from the Integrity Commissioner, and given the nature of my relationship to CKHA, I am not prevented from carrying out budget deliberations on this item as long as I'm doing so from my stance as a municipal councillor, but would like to declare the indirect conflict.
Thank you. Any other pecuniary interests?
More.
I don't see any others. Okay. Next item is deputations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one deputation tonight. Mayor, Council, Municipality of Chatham-Kent, regarding Greenwood Cemetery budget request. The Greenwood Cemetery is requesting the previous grant of $10,000 allocated by the municipality be reinstated to assist with ongoing operations. Greenwood Cemetery serves Ridgetown and surrounding areas as a full-service cemetery, similar in size and operation as the municipality-operated cemetery in Blenheim. Cemeteries, as can be attested by your own past and current budget operations cost, most often fall short of breaking even. Prior to amalgamation, the town of Ridgetown and township of Howard supported Greenwood, and the municipality of Chatham-Kent maintained this funding from budget-based funds until 2015. Unfortunately, issues such as the ongoing COVID pandemic has greatly affected not only revenue, but also donations. Your support with this grant will assist our ongoing operations. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Jim Brown, Chair. Thank you.
That's all our deputations for this evening. We'll continue going through the binder. We are on tab 7. We completed tab 5 last week. So we'll go through tab 7, starting with page 1, and we'll get those up on the screen. As a reminder, there's some additions to these tabs. So if you're going through your binder versus the new items sent, there will be some discrepancies on the screen. Any items, tab 7, page 1? Any items, tab 7, page 2? And as a reminder, those new items 172 and 178 are added, and you'll see those online here. But they may not be in your binder if you haven't updated that. And those two new items are the CHA request and the pickleball request. Councillor Solomon, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, line 178. I'm not seeking to have it removed. I just want some information. It says 10 new pickleball courts at 5 locations. Will we get a report ultimately from administration as to the locations and some kind of proof of anticipated usage?
Thank you, Budget.
I'll be very blunt about it. I'm all in favor of having pickleball courts. I think it's a great way for a certain age group to continue to exercise and have recreation. But I hope we're not just putting these certain places just to balance off out in various wards. We're doing it because there's a demand in that area. So I'm hoping somebody tell me, are we going to get a report that says we recommend a pickleball court at X location because of the demand that we've received from, X number of people in that general location. I'm not hearing much, Mr. Chairman.
I'll direct. Thomas, can you take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Thomas Kelly. I'm General Manager of IES. So thank you for the question, Councillor Solomon. There are two schools of thoughts right now. And one is, first of all, we have enough funding with what the province has given us, the $430,000, plus our own contribution of about 125, that we can create 10 pickleball courts. So the two schools of thoughts are as follows, that we put those in strategic locations around CK, or the other thought is that we try to consolidate as many in one location. Benefits of consolidating is that I can tell you as a player as well, is that when you go to the site, then you have your options of many courts to choose from, and it reduces the wait time. But also you're able to attract tournaments, for example, have competitions with other municipalities and things like this. So our intent is to work with all of the various pickleball associations within Chatham-Kent and come back with a report that talks about just the things you've raised, is not only what's the market demand, what we expect the usage to be, but also what is our final recommendation on the location, and will it be 5 different courts of 2? Will it be 5, just all 10 in one location? That's what my team is looking at right now, and and we will come back with a report. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. That's the exact kind of answer I was looking for. We went through this kind of process several years ago with respect to tennis courts, when there was you may not even recall it, but there was a big tennis boom at one point in time. And we received just the kind of report that Mr. Kelly's talking about. So I'm glad to hear that. I'd love to, if we're going to spend money, let's do it in a well thought out, logical manner.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Finn.
Councillor Finn, you're muted.
I keep forgetting that part. The question I got asked over the weekend, the $429,000 grant, that was for specifically pickleball courts and couldn't be used for any other? Because I know there's communities that like an outdoor basketball court. Others would like a ball hockey rink. So if anybody could clarify that.
Thank you, Budget Chair. It's Thomas Kelly again. So it is very specific. The application was for pickleball and it must be used for pickleball. We're also, considering, because right now we have pickleball courts on tennis courts, though, we're looking at, again, just trying to maximize usage and to be very creative. And that must be used for pickleball, but could we integrate additional tennis courts as well to create an even better facility? And all of that will be addressed in the report that will come back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Councillor Bondi.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question and comment. Question number 1. Thomas, will these be dedicated pickleball courts, as in not tennis courts? As the sizes of the courts, as you're aware, are quite different. So yeah, that's the question. And the comment is, and again, Thomas, and you'd be aware, I hope that when we look at locations, we'll take into consideration that pickleball is an extremely loud sport. And I'm all for this, but I know they've run into some problems south of the border where pickleball is incredibly, incredibly popular, that it's very loud. It's not like tennis. It's pretty noisy. So just as long as that's taken into consideration. But back to the question of, are they dedicated pickleball courts, which I really do hope they are, as I have a motion about tennis courts coming up. But as you also are aware, when courts are shared, the lines on the courts are quite confusing. So that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thanks for the question again. The funding is for 10 pickleball courts. We are trying to be creative though, and to look at a flexible facility as we could get. So for example, we create 10 dedicated pickleball courts, but have potentially the flexibility that is there a way that we could turn those into tennis courts if the usage goes down? So in my mind, I'm just trying to create as much flexibility as possible, but the actual grant was for 10 pickleball courts. Thank you. And as far as the other question, the noise, that's also going to be addressed in the report as well. Thank you.
And great, thank you, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi. Any other questions, items of interest in tab 7? I think Councillor Bondi was putting his hand down, unless you had another comment, Councillor Bondi. Oh, great. Okay, so seeing no other hands for tab 7, we'll move on to items not recommended, tab 8. Councillor Crew.
Chair,
Sorry,
just a reminder that these are not recommended, so we'll need a motion to add these to the budget if anyone would like anything added.
Yes. Councillor Crew, go ahead.
Thank you. Once I figure out which buttons to push here. Okay, I would like to move that item 163 from tab 8 for the EMS service enhancements be added to the 2022 proposed budget. The municipal portion of this item be funded at $126,141 from the assessment growth reserve base, with the remaining $452,177 added to the tax base. The provincial portion in the amount of $578,318 to be funded one time from the 2022 ambulance general reserve 17281.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. Seconded by Councillor Harrigan. Comments, Councillor Crew?
Yes, I have a few comments, but I'd like to, is Chief Case on the line?
I am Councillor Crew.
If you, Chief, like I said today, I was going to ask you to explain the need in our community and the risks and some issues of concern that have come up lately as a result of stretching our ambulance thin.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. So Council will recall that the EMS annual report was put before Council in the fall, and that gives a full breakdown of the activity to date, and our EMS providers provide service level recommendations. It's worth noting that since 2007, there has been one enhancement in 2018, and we continue to see a 3 to 4% calls for service increase year on year. Some of the headlines, I can tell you that our response times for code 4, that is the most serious of calls for the EMS, has increased. And more concerningly, we're beginning to see an increase in code red. That is where we've got less than 3 ambulances. And we've also seen somewhat of an increase in code black. And code black is where we do not have any ambulances at all. Now, I have to temper this. These increases are large, but if I was to tell you that in 2021, we had no ambulances for a total of 65 minutes in the year, that doesn't sound too bad.
but the previous years was 12 minutes up to 23 minutes. So over the space of 2020 to 2021, we've seen our cold black times triple. I think overall, these are the recommendations that come from our service provider. They are doing an astounding job of keeping ambulances on the road during probably the most difficult time that the service has seen in living memory. And when the recommendations come through, I feel duty bound to put them in front of council. It is worth noting that the reason that these are in the non-recommended section of the binder is because 1, they're not mandated, and 2, it's not currently a council direction. If I can provide any more comments or clarity, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you for the time, Mr. Budget Chair.
Thank you, Chief. I just have a couple comments. So, you know, it's unfortunate that this is going to reflect as an increase because the entire amount should have come from assessment growth reserve. And I believe that because I think that, you know, when you drive around Chatham-Kent and you see all this new growth, the new roads, the new houses, the new apartment buildings that are just popping up on every street, well, they have people in them. And when we grow with people, we need to provide services to those people, and ambulance being one when they need it. This growth is exciting, but it isn't so exciting when we get to budget and we have to find the dollars to make these service level increases. Besides growth, there's other things that are affected in our community. We have a huge population of seniors, which is growing. We have the opioid crisis, just to name a few things. Council is responsible for setting the level of service to our community. And I think that our community health and safety and well-being and setting that level of service is our responsibility. I understand, and you know, I don't want to pay more taxes either. However, the same people that are hoping that we can get this to zero, boy, when they want an ambulance, if they hit one of those black codes, may not get it, and we sure will hear it then. So, you know, I understand, but we really have a responsibility to make sure that our service levels, especially when it comes to the health and safety of our citizens, is protected. And the other thing is that this is matching provincial dollars. So we're putting that money out right now, but that money will come back. So if we don't fund it, we're going to leave that money on the table. And they've been financially responsible all these years. They've only come to us for a few hours of increase, but we all know the growth that we're encouraging. And if we're going to encourage growth, we need to fund it properly. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. If you could come back to me at the end, I may have a comment.
Of course. Thank you, Councillor Crew. Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question to Chief Case. Chief, I can't say that I know a lot about this besides what we've been, presented in council. But there's a lot of talk about the offloading and the challenges at the hospital as well. I just wanted to see if you could speak to that briefly. If the increase in over 60 minutes, if you felt that the offloading challenges also affect this as well, or if it's just a sheer need for having another ambulance. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. It has to be said that we have seen some offload delays at the hospital, and a lot of that is due to capacity, and the current concerns pretty much down to COVID, we would say, is that we are seeing those delays. What I can advise is that over the past 2 to 3 years, the EMS management have done tremendous work with hospital management to deal with those delays as quickly as possible. And we're seeing those being dealt with far more effectively than we normally would. There are other plans in place to try and reduce the offload delays, but overall, I would suggest this is a capacity based upon call volume rather than something that's being caused specifically by offload delays. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, it does, Chief. And I know that you can't predict the future as well, Chief. My last question is that is there any anticipation for further potential cuts from the provincial funding for our land ambulances? Or do you feel that the current structure is something that's going to be status quo for quite some time?
Again, as you quite correctly said, Sodin, it's difficult to predict the future, but there is no indication of any kind of cuts coming. There was some discussions in the past about the province looking at a different way of providing land ambulances. That was prior to COVID. So right now, I would suggest that we are in a status quo situation, maintaining our service levels whilst the bigger discussions take place. But I can't imagine that happening very, very quickly.
Thank you for your response, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sukachi. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Regarding the 126,141 from the assessment growth, what will that do to our budget next year? Because it'll automatically be a base budget, but are we going to have to come up with that amount twice next year to meet the current level?
Steve, would you like to take that one?
Thanks, Mr. Budget Chair. So the assessment growth reserve, it's a base budget item. So basically what will happen is that budget would be transferred over to the ambulance portion. So there would be no impact on the 2023 budget.
Okay, that's good. And the other, the provincial portion, that's just lending that money and it will be returned into that reserve once we get the provincial funding. Is that correct?
The province typically funds the ambulance the year after, so it wouldn't be lending, it would actually be a drawdown from that reserve with anticipation that the province would then fund it moving into 2023.
Okay, so at the end of the day, we aren't losing that money then, I guess.
Yep, so correct. So at the end of the day, we will lose, we'll have to fund the full portion this year, and then in the 2023, the province would then fund their half.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. I just have a few comments in support of Councillor Crew's motion here. And first is one to applaud Councillor Crew for always thinking about our community and health and wellness of our community in the work that she does in the daytime and the work that she does as a councillor. This is a kind of motion that is, maybe hard for some to discuss, thinking about turning whatever that tax increase number is to make it a little bit higher. But ultimately what we're doing here is we're investing in services that we know our community members need. We know that people in the community have approached us as councillors from time to time after very difficult situations where they were waiting for ambulances or had experience with our EMS, and oftentimes it's part of our large geography, it's part of the health system, it's certainly very complicated and complex. But we did receive a report back in October that outlined some of those challenges and how, as a service provider, Don McCullen and Medavie have really been working towards being as efficient as they can in providing that service. And in my daytime work, I work with Don and with the health system partners through the OHT, and I know that they're at a point right now where finding opportunity and finding efficiency is really not on the table. I've heard him use the line, "We're out of chess moves," and certainly it's time to think about now growing the service level that we are providing through investing in our emergency response services. And when I think about our council and I think about the priority of health and well-being in our CK 2035 plan, this is something that I can stand behind. It's something that we can invest in, and it's something that when people say, well, tell me about that tax increase and what it provided. We talk about roads, we talk about investing in bridges, we talk about investing in our community, and here we're talking about the health and well-being and making sure the services that people need when they need it most are there for them. So those are just some quick comments on my end, and I really appreciate that this is coming forward and how it is very much tied to growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe if I can just circle back for a second, Mr. Chair, and and get Chief Case maybe just to clarify something for me. I know he mentioned that this item obviously was in the not recommended tab of our binder, and he said it's not having this extra ambulance enhancement, I guess, is not mandated, it's not legislated, and it's not the level of service that council provides. But can you just talk to me again? I know you touched on that, Chief, but can you talk to me about the need for this motion that Councillor Crew is bringing forward?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. In terms of the need, we are seeing, it's a very simple equation. We're seeing increases of calls for service, and we've got the same level of ambulances. So this would increase one of the units to a 24-hour ambulance during the week, and it would add an extra 12 hours on during the weekend to give us an additional 24-hour ambulance. So we're basically taking one of the ambulances, which is part-time, and making it a 24-hour asset during the week and during the weekend. On top of that, it allows the operational supervisors to not be based on the ambulance, to be able to work independently. That's good for the safety of the crews. It's also good for maintaining the system, which is, this has been in play, you'll recall, since COVID has been in with us, and that's allowed us to maintain the system much better. So between the two, we're seeing improvements for safety for the crews, improvements for safety to the public, and overall increasing our capacity to deal with what is an increasing calls for service. And it's worth mentioning, we were seeing increasing calls for service before we started seeing community growth. So I imagine that's a bit round the houses, Councillor Hall, but I hope it covers some of the points you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And I apologize to my colleagues if I had to get you to say that again. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I don't see any other comments on this this motion, so we will go back to Councillor Crew for some closing remarks. And before we do that, I do see Councillor Solomon's hand just popped up. So we'll go to Councillor Solomon first, followed by Councillor Crew.
Yes, there's a lot of buttons to be pushing here to get the hand up in time. Through the chairman to Chief Case, you generally answered a question from Councillor Hall, but I'm still having a little trouble understanding the increase in demand. We are finally, after 25 years, seeing some increase in some growth in Chatham-Kent building and houses, principally in the Chatham area. But we still have not achieved the population that we had in 1997, 25 years ago. I looked that stat up just recently, and we are still below what we were in 1997. So can you be more specific on where this demand is coming from? I mean, is it COVID related? Is it some other specific demographic change? Is it a health or mental health or drug related? I mean, I'm not getting why, when our population hasn't even got back to what it was in 1997, that we're experiencing greater demand. And there's probably some good reason, but I'd like to know the specific of it, not just that the demand's increased. Why?
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. The best way that I can put it is that our population is getting older and our population is getting sicker. Even with the use of our community paramedicine program and the partnerships that we have been engaged with, we are seeing increases demand for service. And if I give you an example, the forecast for 2021 was just over 14,000 calls. And to ring true, the calls volume came out at 14,261. So the demand for service, this 3 to 4% increase year on year, has been wrung out by what we're seeing on the ground. And these are not just the minor calls. We're seeing increases very much in the more emergent calls. So that's the calls where we have someone who's having a heart attack or a stroke or someone who's lost consciousness. As for the actual individual cases, well, with respect, I would have to deep dive and give you a much more broader interpretation. Whether we can put it down to mental health or the opioid crisis or COVID, we actually saw a reduction in calls for service over 2020 because people actually didn't call the ambulances quite as much. But we still saw well over 13,000 calls in 2020. So depending on what you're looking for, Councillor Sullivan, I can go away and come back with a breakdown of call types and illnesses and the such. But I can tell you overall, there are more people dialing 911 and asking for an ambulance in 2021 than we saw in 2012, to the tune of around 10,000 calls. I hope that helps, sir.
Well, it's somewhat helpful. I don't believe in the least that it's the growth that we're experiencing, because we still don't have the population that we had in 1997. But I do accept that we've had some demographic changes because we've got an aging population. I get that part. And I suspect, although you can't tell me right now, that a considerable amount of it may be due to the opioid crisis. So maybe the combination of that and demographics may have increased the demand. Now, is the demand, can you tell me one other thing, Chief Case, through the chairman? Is there geographic base to the demand? I mean, are you seeing the demand from that you can't meet because of the geographic area of Chatham-Kent, or is it everywhere, or is it? I'm not, the size of the highest populated area geographically hasn't changed one iota since 1997. That is the boundary. So is there a geographic component to this that I'm not getting?
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. In terms of the geographical calls, the EMS service is complicated by the fact that there is only one hospital. So unlike our fire operations where the crew leave, say, Thamesville and then go and run a call and then come straight back to Thamesville, it's much more complicated than that with EMS calls, because the crew have to attend the scene, then go to the nearest hospital and then come back again. So what you find is that whilst the ambulance crews may be based at a station, they find themselves all over the place during the working shift, as you can imagine. But we are seeing the calls do tend to gravitate towards the populous areas. So Chatham, Wallaceburg, Blenheim, these are the places where we see more calls because it's where we have more people. But again, in what this is trying to do is it is trying to increase the overall availability of ambulances to meet that demand on a municipal-wide aspect rather than one specific area.
Okay, thank you very much. My only comment, Mr. Chairman, is that I feel much more comfortable if this were a year where we had the full revenues from the casino, because that would cover all of this. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those years.
I appreciate the questions, Councillor Solomon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Pinsino.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I get that there's a need for this with the aging demographics. However, administration didn't. They did put it underneath the not recommended tab, and I have to think when they're having their discussions before they put the budget together, some of the things that were put on there I actually scratched my head a little bit on, but they did not find this important enough to fit in there. It's not mandated, and I guess I'm not in favor of adding to this budget number. In my opinion, it's not low enough yet as it is. And then I'd really like to see this pushed over till next year, revisit it then. And yeah, that's all I got to say. Thank you. I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Pinsino. Any other comments before we move back to Councillor Crew for the final comments on this motion? I don't see any other hands. Councillor Crew, go ahead. Oh, I see one more hand. Sorry, Councillor Crew, we'll delay you again. Councillor Sakachi, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one more question to Chief Case. Chief, is this mandatory that we had to fund it for this exact amount? Like you're using partial ambulances and stuff, you know, in terms like that. Is it something that we could still add some service without funding a full 24 hours like you stated, or does that formula just not work? And I'm sorry to take the floor again. I do apologize.
No, thank you, Councillor Sakachi. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. So this is the recommendation from our EMS provider. Based upon their assessment, as part of their contract, they have to provide us an annual report, and then they have to provide us with any suggestions for service enhancement. What this is doing is utilizing existing assets, i.e. the ambulances, and just increasing their availability on the road when they'd normally be parked up in the garage. So what we're actually doing here is increasing the use of the ambulances and changing the way that the supervisors work. So in terms of actual costs, there's no cost for an ambulance, there's no cost for equipment. This is just using the existing resources more than we have in the past.
Thank you, Chief. I guess maybe I just framed my question. So is there a way to add, does it have to be in this amount? Can we still add some additional hours? Does it still work? Because I know there's a lot of complexity to it. Is there still the ability to add more hours without going to the extent in case this doesn't go through? Is there still the ability to, I'm just not sure how it would work from a unionized standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, from a ambulance standpoint. Let's say if we were able to fund it half of this amount, would that still work, or is the requirement, can you still make it work for less than the amount required at a lower capacity level of staffing? For let's say the weekends, if you needed the weekends, or there was days, let's say, you know, if you needed more ambulances Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays, that you see, like, is there a way to still staff it without going to the extent of the 578,000?
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. A really good question. So the predominance of this money is on the wage bill. So any kind of increase would increase the service provision, but it's whether it would increase it to the level that is required to maintain our levels of service. And that's why we rely on the analysis and the recommendations of our service provider. So if this was not to go through, then there would be the potential for us to go back and look at some other options. But what I can tell you is that these costings were put forward, and as part of our budget process, I did ask our EMS provider to recalculate and try and give me some savings so that I could present the lowest number possible to council, which they did do at the time. So we have made every effort to try and reduce the impact to the taxpayer as much as we can. But again, it very much depends on council's wishes. Whatever council wish, we will try and make it work and come back with any options possible.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the second question there. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I see no other hands up. I'm not going to let any other hands come up. We're going to Councillor Crew. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the discussion and council's input. It is up to all of us to set the level of service, and I hope that we have the foresight and looking forward, if you will, to see that we need this in our community as we grow. The demographics, all of the crises that we have faced, and you know what, I don't even think it's COVID related. It just was another fly in the ointment. So I hope the council will consider voting in favor of this, and I really appreciate all of your input. Oh, I just want to say too, just to make sure that everyone understood, this isn't a capital cost. This is a human cost. This is funding the people that are doing the work. So it's not to buy another ambulance or gas, of course, but that's where the funding will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. With that, I will call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 12-6.
I might have been muted. Apologies. Other items of interest, Councillor Bondi, go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to make a motion regarding line item, I don't know, because I can't see it, but it's the tennis dome thing. So whatever line item that is. And I'd sent this motion in earlier, so maybe it's available, but if not, I'll just read it out because there is one change. So anyway, here we go. That councillors support the tennis dome by committing $200,000 to the proposed budget. The funds will be forwarded to the project after satisfactory funding is secured from other sources to complete the project. The funding will come from strategic reserves. That's kind of the additional part. And I'll continue. The report will return to council later this year and will then require final ratification by council. And if I could comment on that, please.
We'll just get a seconder first.
Oh, yeah. Might not have.
Seconded by Councillor Finn. So Councillor Bondi, if you want to go ahead and make some comments while they put that motion up, go ahead.
Well, that's two down. Okay, so obviously I'm not much of a spender when it comes to budget or any other time in the last 11 years, but I think this is a worthwhile thing. And the reason why I think it is what I'm asking council to do is to commit $200,000, but not spend the $200,000. We have to wait for the group to come back and see what they come up with. Anyway, to start with, let me just, for full transparency, I'm a member of the Chatham Tennis Club. I'm an avid tennis player, so I almost feel I have a conflict, right? Because I'll be the first guy in there. But you know, that being said, just so that that's out there, what this is Rogers and Tennis Canada have granted this group $200,000 for the project. The project's worth about $1 million. So the group is asking for a $200,000 commitment from the municipality. Now, we would only grant that money when necessary. We would obviously earmark it, but that will give them the vehicle to raise the additional funds necessary to complete the project. So we're basically kind of, you know, going to have their back on this one. If it doesn't work and they don't get additional funding and it falls flat, then council will have the opportunity to back out of this thing. So this really is just supporting the initiative. And again, what the municipality would gain would be an indoor tennis and pickleball facility. And this is at the John McGregor courts, like the John Carpenter courts. It's a complicated affair because the land is owned by the school board. The municipality takes care of the actual tennis courts and owns the courts. That's very similar to the Chatham Tennis Club's situation. There's an operating cost, which in some conversation with administration today, those operating costs would have to be attributed to a base budget eventually if this thing, you know, happens. Now, that's a little complicated because the operating life cycle cost of this facility, which, you know, of course, in case people are unaware, the facility's there. There's a 4-court tennis court in existence. It's been there since I was a kid, so that's going back a long time. So this is effectively just a dome. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about constructing new courts. The courts are there. It's a dome. So the life cycle cost and effectively the maintenance of this will really, I think, I can speak confidently, will be covered by a lot of volunteers. There's a lot of people involved in the tennis community in Chatham. It's growing, and as you would have heard in the deputation in the first night of budget, the Chatham Tennis Club's membership doubled last year in COVID, which is like surprising. So as Councillor Solomon had suggested, that at one time there was a tennis boom, probably in the 70s. Well, it's back. Tennis is the largest growing sport in North America. It's played by people of all ages. Again, I can't go on and on because I love tennis, right? But, you know, others could argue for football or cricket. But I think it's a good investment in that it's a $200,000 commitment to a maybe, and the municipality will effectively inherit about $1 million facility. It's great for newcomers to Chatham, and as we also heard in the deputation on day one, that it's one of the top 3 sports of new Canadians. We're trying to bring in some immigration to Chatham-Kent. And as some of us would remember, we did have indoor tennis at the Wheels Inn years and years ago, and it was popular. So this would just be bringing it back, and that's going back probably 25 years now. The other thing that I think is pretty important is by doing this, if we do this, if the facility is somewhere in the range of a 75% occupancy, it'll be a break even, and it won't need any additional municipal money. So, you know, nobody can see the future, nobody has a crystal ball, but as a member of the tennis community, I think that's definitely possible. I've taken my son and myself to Windsor, and some of my daughters actually, to Windsor over the last couple of years, like 12, 15, to play winter tennis in Windsor, and there's a lot of Chatham smiles over there. So I think it's there. Again, this is it's an ask, and I hope that council supports it. I would hope it comes out of strategic reserves. And as far as operating budget, well, let's see. Like, let's let them come back in a couple of months and see how successful they are in their fundraising. So it's just giving them, you know, the gas to move forward on this thing. And that is all I have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi.
You're
Mayor
welcome.
Caniff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted a couple of comments on this as well. I think this is a fantastic example of public-private partnership. We're looking at, if we put, as we as a municipality put 200,000 in, that we get, there's going to be an asset worth a whole lot more than that. So we've got other grants coming in. We're going to have personal individuals stepping up as well to do this. And so I think we're committing right now to 200,000, assuming that they raise it all. But I look forward to the tennis club coming back with some very creative solutions regarding the operating costs. Because so currently the 310,000 is mentioned in the report is really tough to swallow moving forward. But I expect it to come down significantly, as Councillor Bondi pointed out, that I would expect a lot of volunteers stepping up as well. And if the tennis club was actually run it, or various, but I'm looking at the solutions right now, we're effectively not committing anything other than saying we're going to put 200,000 towards this, assuming that they can raise it all and come back with some sort of reasonable operating costs moving forward. So I'm very much supportive of this, because I think this is another great example of moving forward with public-private partnership, and it's not all on the municipal dime. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. And just maybe a question to Gord to clarify for the motion. So as the motion stands, this is just committing $200,000 of one-time money from a reserve. So that's no tax impact going forward. That's just one-time money, a commitment contingent upon other funding coming in, and then any operating costs would be a separate discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. The current estimate is about 1.2 million of capital, where they've secured 200,000 from Tennis Canada, I believe, and asking 200,000 of council. They would then need to go fundraise for the other 800,000 of capital costs. And the item in the new line in the budget did have the early estimate of what the total operating costs and life cycle would be at 310,000. This motion will require the group to come back with that detailed operating plan, and I think it would be a terrific opportunity for other whether it's service clubs or our volunteer sector or private sector to support those operating costs, so there perhaps wouldn't be an operating cost coming back to municipal council for 2023. Because now I just want to point out, not necessarily negative, but just for clarity, this is a commitment to fund without the commitment for any operating costs that might come back on 2023 council. But the way this motion is written, it is just about initial commitment with a final report with all the details coming back when the entire idea is fully baked and ready for council.
Great, thanks, Gord. Councillor Crew, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gord, how healthy, I was just trying to look it up, but how healthy is our strategic development reserve? Is he looking or?
Yeah, you're looking
Okay.
right now.
Sorry,
Oh,
yes, I'm
okay.
looking.
No, that's okay.
Yes, it does have a healthy balance, estimated to be around 3.9 million currently.
Okay, all right. I'm going to support this because I too believe in private municipal partnerships and especially citizen involved. One thing that I just want to mention, some of us that were around a few terms ago, Councillor Larry Robbins mentioned indoor tennis courts, probably every other meeting that he wanted to get funded. So this just made me think of him, and I thought, boy, he'd be pretty happy with this finally. But anyway, I just wanted to say that just made me think of him.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. Any other comments on this motion before we go? Oh, Councillor Solomon, go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been through these kind of things before, and I want to support this, but I'd like one word to be changed in the resolution before council, and that's on line 3, where it says after satisfactory funding is secured from other sources. I prefer it say is received from other sources. So, and I'll tell you why, and maybe I guess I'll have to bring a motion to amend unless the mover and second are okay with that.
Yeah, Councillor Bondi, would you be okay with that change?
Mr. Chair, maybe. That's not a yes or no, is it? That doesn't come up on the drop-down menu, maybe, right?
No.
If I could just speak to Councillor Solomon's suggestion, funding is received, and I'm very much okay with that. But if, and I'll just direct this to Councillor Solomon, if somebody was to go to the Solomon Law Firm and ask for funding for this, would somebody put up, like, say, $10,000 and actually write the check knowing that that's a maybe, and it may sit in an account for 6 or 7 months and then fail? So I'm just like, I'm okay with it. Obviously, I just want to see the thing get through, but how would a letter of intent or something? It's just, I don't know if anybody's going to fork over the dough knowing it's going to sit somewhere for 8 months until they start building and council approves it. So I'm okay with it, but maybe could we just change the receive to something legally more accurate, which I think I'm talking to the right guy here. So
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to respond?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Solomon.
Okay, so here's the problem I have. Yes, I think the municipality can set up an account that can hold the money in trust, that any citizen group may want to, or service club may want to commit to, or actually write the check for. The difficulty is I've seen the arenas being built in the past, and people making commitments, and then when the time comes, the money isn't there, and guess what? The taxpayers are called upon again to make up the deficit. So I'm much more of the view that, yeah, we commit our $200,000, and you know that the municipality will pay it, but until we got the money in the bank, we're not putting up our 200. We're not spending our 200. That is actually not spending the individual taxpayers 200 that is received from property taxes. That's why I say received, because I've seen a shortfall. I've seen shortfalls before. And people get all enthusiastic and say, sure, I will. And then when the time comes, oops, the money doesn't come also. So I think it's a great idea to do this out of the Strategic Development Reserve. It doesn't add to the current tax bill, but you want to make sure that you're not laying a burden on property taxpayers in the future for a shortfall. That's all. That's why I say received.
And if I could, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Mondi.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, actually, that was great legal advice. So, and that was free legal advice. So it's not very often. Yeah, I'm okay with that because actually, as Councillor Selman has just detailed, sure, we could get a guy who says, you know, I'll donate $50,000 and then he dies and his kids have nothing to do with Chatham or tennis. And there goes the 50 G's and then everybody's on the hook for it. So I'm okay with it. If the seconder is okay, I'm okay.
Councillor Finn, are you okay with that change as well?
After that advice, I'm okay with it.
Okay, so we'll get that wording changed. Did we have any more comments on the motion? Mr. Thomas, you wanted to make some comments?
Thank you, Budget Chair. So I've just been trying to do some research. I do not believe, I just want to make council aware, this group will, no, they do not receive the Tennis Canada / Rogers money until we have a committed project as well. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. I'm trying to confirm that right now. And I may have just got an answer. That's correct. So when we say we won't receive the money from Canada either, but we will receive it when we have a business case together, there's a committed funding, and we've essentially cut the purchase order for the new dome. So I just want to make council aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Do we have any other comments related to the motion? I'll circle back to Councillor Bondi last. I'll make a few comments. So I think that it's, I appreciate the motion and I think it's put together appropriately to give this group some more legs to stand on to complete some fundraising and look at some other ways to operate the facility. And it's a really good opportunity. It's you know, a lot of work to get that funding from Tennis Canada, and that's I think a great first step. And I know our communities in the past has been really successful at some of these fundraising projects. So I think that this is the right way to do this. It doesn't have a tax impact this year. It's something that can be discussed when we get to operating, when we get to that point. So I think this is a good first step forward and appreciate the motion. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's about it. I think it's pretty straightforward and I hope for council support. Thank you.
And with that, I'll call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-1.
Thank you. Any other items in tab 8, items not recommended? Any questions, items of interest? Seeing none, we'll move to general motions from the floor. So just as a reminder, we can revisit anything in the binder, any tab item, any decision that's been made prior. This doesn't work the same way as it does at council. We're able to change those decisions without any 2/3 votes. So any general motions from the floor? Any other questions? Mayor Caniff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to something we talked about night one was regarding the 650,000 coming from, we talked about moving from inflation into the shoreline reserve. I know we cut it back from from 1.9 to 1.25, but we need 650,000 in 2022. So I'd like to make a motion for the year 2022. We move 650,000 from the inflation increase into the shoreline reserve, and start back. The inflationary number will return back to the amount we approved the first time, starting in 2023. So it's a one-time movement from the inflation dollars to the shoreline reserve of 650 to cover off the shortfall in 2022 to redo the Highway 3.
And just as a reminder, I know that was a few nights ago now, but essentially that's moving money back into the capital budget, because when we removed that from the shoreline reserve, based on the approval of the capital budget by council, that dropped off the 3 projects, including Mitchell's Bay Trail and park development in new subdivisions.
And to clarify, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
And to clarify, that has no tax impact. It's a reshuffle of the deck for 1 year regarding how we're allocating the capital dollars that we've put into the budget. So there's no change in the budget. What it does, it preserves, as you point out, Mr. Chair, those 3 projects that we were looking at having to cut, which is Mitchell's Bay, the internet, and parks. So thank you, Mr. Chair. If I get a seconder, that'd be wonderful.
Seconded by Councilor McGrail. So I'll have this motion put up shortly. Did we have any questions or comments on the motion? Councilor Harrigan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Super supportive of the motion, but just a more technical question. Gord, can you please identify kind of what the 2 final numbers would be in the lines in the budget then on page 1 of tab 4.3?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the end, this is really about a one-time transfer of $650,000 out of the base to capital, out of our regular base for infrastructure over to capital. So our total capital expenditures, our both the life cycle and our capital budget, our total capital expenditures actually remains exactly the same. There's no change, right? It's just it's a shift. I don't want to simplify it too far, but basically we're going to pave a little bit less roads or something in life cycle budget this year. Have the 650 shift to fund those projects that were at near the end of the capital budget, and then next year that money returns to their general life cycle budget for in base ongoing. So I hope that answers the question. This is basically just a one-time transfer of 650,000 for this year.
Thank you, Gord. Any other comments related to this motion? Now that we see the motion, any further questions before we go back to Mayor Caniff for a closing comment? I don't see any other hands raised. Mayor Caniff, did you want to make any other comments related to the motion?
No, I think this is pretty straightforward. It fixes a lot of the issues. We fixed 3 issues that we can get the shoreline stuff done. We can do the projects that would have eliminated otherwise, and we'll have long-term funding of 650,000 within the inflation moving forward in 2023. So I think it's a win-win scenario for everything.
Thank you. And with that, we'll call the question.
Just waiting for one more, Council.
Madam Clerk, that it's Councillor Sakachi. The wheel's just spinning. I'm a yes. Sorry, I can't.
Okay.
Want me to vote on this one here.
Okay, thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Thank you. And just as we continue through general motions for an update, The current tax impact sits at 3.26% since adding the cost for ambulance back into the budget. Councillor Pinsino, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. From the earlier deputation tonight, I'd like to move that Greenwood Cemetery budget of $10,000 be reinstated from the appropriate cemetery budget. And if I get a seconder, I'd like to explain myself.
Seconded by Councillor Wright. Go ahead, Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you. Their operating budget runs 40 to 50,000 every year, and it has for several years. The revenue from openings and the lot sales is roughly about 23,000 a year. So they run a deficit every year. They've been able to keep it the wheels on the wagon by donations from the service clubs, money that they receive from different places. However, with COVID, their donations have dried right up, and honestly, they're at a $15,000 deficit right now. And if we as a municipality take this back, it's going to cost us $50,000 a year to run at minimum. And it's probably going to cost more because they have some pretty good things in place for the burials and everything else, where they're running pretty efficiently. It's probably going to cost us about $70,000 to $75,000 a year to run it in-house. Once upon a time, as it said in the deputation, there was a grant there. The municipal cemeteries all run at a deficit as well. And that money there is funded by the whole tax base to make up the deficits. So I think this is a really fair ask. And anyway, I look forward to hearing what my fellow councillors have to say. Thanks.
Councillor Wright, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, Steve is right. They're having some troubles out there with losing all their assistance from the community groups. They're trying hard. They're doing a good job. They just need some assistance, or like Steve says, we're going to end up with it back again, and we run it up until I believe 2015. So if we could keep it out of the passing this over to Chatham-Kent, it would probably be better to give a little amount than a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Harrigan, you're still muted, I think.
Yeah, double muted on the Zoom call, sorry. So through you to Thomas Kelly. Thomas, my question is around other community operated cemeteries in Chatham-Kent. I'm wondering if you can share a bit of information around how many there are across the community.
Thank you, Budget Chair, and thanks for the question. It's Thomas Kelly, GM of IES. So we actually have 50 privately run cemeteries. So I believe council needs to be very careful with this request because it's not just a $10,000 request. It's a private corporation. So you may get the same ask from the other 49. You may get the same ask from other private companies as well. Prepared to provide $10,000 to this one particular cemetery. There's also a case where even in the vicinity, there's 4 other cemeteries: Morpeth, Highgate, Botany, and St. Michael's as well. This is the only cemetery that's on the table right now asking for funding. Thank you.
And thank you, Thomas. Just to follow up, when you say private corporation, are you referring to just the fact that it's private, or it's private and for profit?
Thank you, Budget Chair. It's private and it can be for profit. What they're indicating is they're not making any profit. This came up in last year's budget as well, and this has been an ask in the past. But since 2015, the agreement was changed, and it's now completely its own organization. If they were able to make profit, they would be able to keep that profit. Thank you.
I'm just wondering, and I'm sure other councillors know where I'm going with this in terms of understanding the scenario. I think that There are a number of not-for-profit, for-profit, and community organizations that have struggled as a result of the current COVID pandemic. And particularly for something like cemeteries, where there may be a number of them across the community that are maintaining the cemetery, I think that this risks, you know, granting this and then potentially having a number of other further requests coming to council. And as a councillor, I don't know if I have enough information, broadly speaking, about cemeteries in general across Chatham-Kent, and feel like more information could be sought. I'd also wonder if there were potential special projects that the cemetery could have applied for, or grants within the municipality itself in projects, or looking for other potential funding, like summer students are funded oftentimes through federal or provincial dollars. So there's other potential funds out there that I don't know if this organization has approached. So I don't feel like I have enough information. Again, I don't think it's a significant amount of money in terms of the taxpayers, but I would want more information before simply granting kind of tax-based dollars towards the amount. And that's not because I'm not sympathetic to the cause. It's just because I think we need to be careful in terms of where it is that we're granting and granting money outside of already existing processes for funds and grants that we have as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Any other comments on this motion? Councillor Sakachi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kelly, is that accurate in regards to the municipality would be forced to take over the cemetery if there was challenges? Is that the case that with all these private cemeteries that we would have to take them on kind of without any conditions, or how does that work?
Thank you, Budget Chair, and that is correct. Again, we have 50 private cemeteries operating within CK, and most of them run very, very successful. This is the only request we have. We know from past practices that this particular cemetery just doesn't charge enough for some of their services. And I just caution council, this is a really dangerous precedent. If you like, what my team will do is come back with a report in another council meeting and give you a comprehensive summary of not just this cemetery, but all cemeteries, and let you know, what our perspective is and what our recommendation is. We do not recommend providing $10,000 to this particular one. We just feel that it's not just 10,000 to this one, that I think council would be obligated to provide all 50 cemeteries with $10,000. So therefore, it's a $500,000 ask, not just a $10,000 ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. That was really helpful in me making my decision. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. Seeing no other comments, we'll go back to Councillor Pinsnow if you have some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This cemetery is bigger than most, though. When the municipality takes back, if it comes to that, it is going to cost a lot of money to run it. As far as it is a non-profit organization. So somebody said earlier it's for profit. It's not. It was always a private cemetery. The municipality was the caretaker for a while. They already use students now to try to keep costs under wraps. The rates that they charge are very similar to all the ones in the neighborhood. So it's not that they're undercharging. And it's honestly, it's going to cost a lot more money in the end. Anyway, thank you. Please support it.
Thank you, Councillor Pinsnow. With that, I will call the vote.
I do have a note from Councillor Bondi. You had to slip away for 10 minutes, so all votes are in. Motion fails 3-14.
Are there any other motions from the floor?
I have one. Sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Pinsnow.
Sorry about that. It's not a motion yet. It's line item number 97. My question is, why do we need a manager for that one?
Sorry, which tab is that, Councillor Pinson?
It's in tab 5, line item 97. Now, I get you need a information specialist and analyst, but I don't see why you need a manager for that.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take it. It's Kathy Hoffman, if you like.
Thank you, Kathy. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pisno, for the question. You may recall from the report to council that Judy Smith brought not too long ago that back in the late fall, we had a consultant come and provide an audit to our current record keeping and governance processes. And as a part of that audit and review, there were a series of recommendations made about processes that we needed to improve to contemporize our record keeping, our ability to respond to freedom of information requests, privacy matters, and so forth. And part of that report included the recommendation for 4 additional full-time equivalent positions. What we did through our EMT process was to review that and actually make a recommendation for 2 base budget positions, one of which is a manager and the other, you saw the other position in there. And given over the last number of years with the really push for importance for transparency and openness and accessibility from the municipal side of things, the number of freedom of information requests that we have seen has skyrocketed in the last 5 years. And currently for an organization our size dealing with both of those in our records management, we're woefully understaffed in that. The FOI requests have become much more complex and much more detailed. I could probably give you a couple of examples of files that we've dealt with over the last year and a half that you may imagine or remember us speaking to you about, both in an open and closed. And they are very labor intensive and require specific skill around that. In addition to that, the KPMG report also supported doing some automation of these kinds of things and streamlining as well. And so for this reason, we've included this position in here in a base budget to try to make sure that we can get on top of this and stay in compliance.
Okay, I am going to move that from line item 97, we remove the manager's position.
Councillor Sakachi, are you seconding that motion?
To get on the floor, Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion, correct.
Thank you. And we'll get that motion up along with the dollar impact.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I should probably add as well that if we did not have that particular position, we would not be able to do the project with 1 staff.
Thank you. Gord, did you want to speak to this?
Thanks. I'm just going to bring in Catherine Fitzgerald, our Director of Information Technology and Transformation. As Kathy just outlined a lot of the more on the management side ongoing with the FOIs, but Catherine's just going to speak to some of the information technology side of what this project is involved. Sorry, not just a project. There's a project and the ongoing needs are for these positions.
Thank you, Budget Chairperson. This is Catherine Fitzgerald, Director of Information Technology and Transformation. So as Kathy mentioned, Council received a report, an assessment report on electronic document and records management in the fall. And that report recognized that most of the information the municipality holds is largely unmanaged. And this has implications for FOI requests. It has implications for day-to-day use of information by the municipality. This can be everything from knowing which version of a report is the current version, or the most accurate version, or the most up-to-date, to simply being able to find information such as case files for our caseworkers in employment and social services. We know that the work from home environment under the pandemic has made this problem much worse for municipal employees. They just simply don't have access to paper documents like they did when they worked in the office. And this particular position will help the organization migrate all of its information to an electronic system and provide the structure and the control on that system on an ongoing basis for municipal employees to be able to access the information that they need to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis. Our information from the assessment is that this is not a one and done project implementation. This will be an ongoing exercise with staff and requires some leadership in terms of ongoing training, records management, retention policies, and destruction of records when appropriate. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'll just close by adding, this is exactly some of the efficiencies that can be gained that were as identified in the KPMG based budget review that they did for us. It's adopting new technologies and moving into the electronic data management that will really unlock those savings for the next term of council.
Thank you, Gord. Councillor Bondy, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I read the report or the recommendations, I'm sorry, the briefing notes. So this would be 3 full-time employees. Is that what I'm reading correctly? Sometimes I find this stuff a little confusing, but is that the case?
It is 2 positions in the base budget, Councillor Bondy, and 1 position in the supplementary budget.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. Kathy, I have to ask, how have we gotten along without these people? Like an additional 1 staff member, makes some sense. There's an overwhelming amount of work, but for an additional 3, seems like, well, and I'm sure you do have the answer for this, but have we been lagging that far behind that all of a sudden we need 3? Well, like 2 plus 1, I guess, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I do understand your question. I have a couple of comments to offer you. I'm first going to invite Judy Smith to give you a couple of comments, Councillor Bondy, since she is also closest to it from the operational side, if that's all right with you, Mr. Budget Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So reluctantly, I would have to say that, yes, this is a new process that we would be implementing. We've always had a good system in place for our records management on the paper basis. We've, amalgamated 23 municipalities into 1. We've maintained those records. We've gone through retention schedules, and we have a good handle on that. What we haven't done well, due to lack of dollars, lack of staff, and is the electronic records management. So some of our systems, and I'm sure Catherine can expand if necessary, we have records saved everywhere on servers back to 1998, and we haven't applied our retentions and so on to those types of records management. We need to have all staff start implementing, and this includes emails and where they save their records and how they save them, so that we can easily find them and how we can meet the retention periods that legislation sets out. So in answer to your question, embarrassing that, this isn't something that's been done, but we have been going back to council every capital budget for the past 5 years, asking for money to put this aside. Now that we've had the needs assessment done and the KPMG stating the efficiencies, in the briefing notes, we mentioned that we may be asking for 2 base requests now and getting through the project with 1 through the capital budget dollars that we have. It's our hopes that we would come back to council when this project's done and let you know that we're able to reduce the number of FTEs that we currently have because of the efficiencies that we saved. So we do have to put these 2 positions out there now, and hoping that after the project's implemented and goes forward, we're able to tell you about more efficiencies that we were able to do with the FTEs. Thank you.
Mr. Budget Chair, I was going to echo one of the last comments that Judy made, which was with respect to the idea that while Catherine had indicated in her comments that this isn't a one and done, which is quite accurate and true, we would, there will be base positions, the 2 base positions that are identified in this. But precisely the reason why the other position is a supplementally funded position for this year is because you need resources in order to be able to do the analysis and to determine what is required for the implementation, and then what can reasonably be harvested off from other total FTEs over a period of time. So as this gets implemented, we will be able to come back to council on the other side of positions, recognizing that this is a corporate solution and a corporate response. It's not something that's simply for the municipal governance area. It's important tools that serve the entire organization in each department, and certainly any of my other colleagues who wish to comment that can certainly do that.
Mr. Chair, if I could just have a follow up.
For sure, Councilor Motti.
Great, thank you. So am I to understand that this is a game of catch up where we've been behind, this task has not been completed, so we're kind of hitting it full on with 2 full-time and 1 supplementary in order to catch up from these records that have been lagging since amalgamation? And before I get an answer to that, if that is the case, would it not be maybe prudent? Because, I've just found over the course of the years that municipal jobs typically don't go away. So would contract positions maybe be an option? And again, I'm not a corporate guru at all. But if it is a catch-up scenario, what about, employing contract employees to get us caught up to the point that we don't need the 2 full-time plus 1 supplementary, which is what we're talking about this evening? Is that option number 4, or is it?
Sorry, Councillor Bondy, I'll maybe go first, and then and then Catherine Fitzgerald may want to comment again on this area. So it isn't about catch up. It is really about actually, there were so many things that got implemented at the time of amalgamation, and it has taken a long time to be able to deal with every single thing that needed attention in a permanent kind of way over the years. And records retention isn't the kind of thing that necessarily attracts, attention when there are lots of other things to be addressed in budgets. And so we've been limping along trying to make corporately these processes work, and not in a very effective or efficient way. And so at the end of the day, not only is it costing us more money to be this ineffective, but we do need to have dedicated resources, not only to implement this, but actually to sustain what is required from contemporizing our organization over time. The one piece that I would say is maybe catch up to your point is because of what we have seen by a huge escalation in the number of FOI requests and privacy matters in the last 5 years, the volume of that has definitely contributed to something that we might now call a catch up. There is absolutely no way with our current staffing that we would ever be able to maintain our requirements for gathering data, finding data, responding in a timely fashion, responding to privacy matters and so forth without these resources. Catherine, have I missed anything on your technical side?
Thank you, Budget Chairperson. Catherine Fitzgerald, Director of Information Technology and Transformation. No, I think we've got most of it there, Kathy, thank you. The only thing I do want to mention is there are opportunities to leverage partners or consultants or temporary staff in areas where there may be a big lift in conversion of documents. So I mentioned the paper case files that we have in employment and social services, and we have several other units that have kind of case files that they work with on a day-to-day basis. That is a lift that we could absolutely look at third-party vendors to convert that information to digital and get it into the records management system. However, the resources that we're talking about here are to, on an ongoing basis, manage and how we organize our information, deal with new information coming forward, deal with the FOI requests and privacy requests that Kathy mentioned, and also make sure that ongoing training is provided to the organization. The EDRMS, or Electronic Document and Records Management System assessment, also recognized that training is an ongoing item for this. This will become part of all municipal employees' day-to-day activity to manage their records and information. And so that ongoing training program is going to be a responsibility of the manager and this team as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Latimer.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Could I just follow up one quick second?
No problem. You're sliding down the screen with all the hands coming up, so I didn't see you. Sorry there, Councillor Bondi.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Hands. Oh, no. Just a kind of a quick, probably simple answer question. The motion reads that blah, blah, blah. Item number 97, tab 5, saving $147,382. And when I look at item number 97, the cost is $266,055. So I'm not quite sure about that.
Councillor Bondi, Councillor Pinsto moved to remove the manager position, but there's two positions in that line item. So he was removing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got
but
it.
we did hear from staff that it wouldn't be sufficient to continue the project with two versus three positions. So.
Okay, great. Sorry, I kind of missed that.
not a problem.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Latimer, go ahead.
Thank you, through the budget chair. While I recognize where Councillor Pincenot is coming from, because I have struggled with this with regard to our overall customer service, but through extended discussion with EMS and Kathy Hoffman and Gord, I've come to recognize that the customer service review and the IT review, those recommendations we need to follow through if we're going to recognize or see the streamlining of our services implemented in the associated cost reductions in the year 23, 24, and 25. I think it's really important that this position deals specifically with internal communication, record retention and management, and ongoing training to sustain that, which will be so important as we shift, or we see a shift to a remote workforce. And that is no doubt going to happen, because we are going to see, and I do intend on bringing forward another motion at the Open Council with regard to a customer service. I think we have to recognize this in the end, and we have to have faith that this is going to streamline and save us money overall. And in some cases, especially here, we are mandated to do that as a municipality. We have no choice. We have to follow the privacy and information regulated legislation. And we have not. We have no one in charge of that. And we are definitely lagging in that area. So I although I do understand where you're coming from, Councillor Pincenot, I cannot support this. But I do have another motion, so I'll have my hand up for later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor McGregor.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. No, I tried lowering my hand, but for some reason it's not lowering. So I'm okay this time.
Okay, no worries. Councillor McGregor. Councillor McGregor, you were muted, or I can't hear you for some other reason. You appear unmuted, and I can see you. Is there? Can't read lips though. Yeah, it seems your audio isn't working. We still can't hear you. You appear to be unmuted on Zoom, so it must be your computer microphone. If there's some mute on there.
Can
Oh,
you
you're
hear
good.
me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, for some reason, my headphones, I'm not sure why that wasn't working. What I'm asking is, with these positions coming forward, and this has obviously been an issue for a very long time, I'm just curious what the major necessity is to have this year, especially when we have an entire community trying to grasp the increase in the rate of inflation and recovering and trying to move forward from COVID. And, you know, we're struggling and doing our best here to keep the rates down. So I'm really struggling with the two positions, and I fully understand where Councillor Bondi's trying to go, but I also understand you need the two. So I'm like, and I would like to know, would it not be more prudent on ourselves to hire simply somebody to come in this year in one position and deal with our freedom of information requests and paperwork, and look at adding this in when our communities are a little better adjusted to the rate of inflation that everybody's dealing with this year?
Mr. Chair, perhaps I could offer a few comments to answer some of Councillor Carmen McGregor's questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you may recall as well that for the last couple of years, Council has also been very interested in trying to go about improving the overall customer service experience in our organization. And you've heard over the course of the last year how we have been moving our various platforms away from what you will remember as ACR, Active Citizen Requests, to the Microsoft 365 platforms. And we recently shared some implementation with you about that. And you've asked for some demonstration to Council in the coming months to let us show you how that new technology is working. And all of that is platform work that the IT team have been doing along with the customer service teams and other internal customers in the organization to provide that front-facing service to our residents and taxpayers to have a better customer service experience. So that has gone through good implementation this year. It's critical that that particular Microsoft 365, that it also has an ongoing operational team to be able to dedicate to the information records management for these positions. It's an integral part of that particular initiative. So they all become very much intertwined. So this particular project it's housed in the municipal governance area, but it's actually very much a corporate response dealing with our IT teams and what they require in order to have in place to be able to deliver on the things that we're doing on the front side of the customer service pieces. So it's sort of, if you imagine taking one piece of the puzzle out, sort of like, you know, the old Kerplunk game, you pull one stick out and things start to fall apart. They're not as effective as the sum of the whole. And so this particular item has been discussed for probably the last 4 or 5 years at budget without ever dedicating some resources to it. So we won't be able to actually implement the project if in fact we don't have the resources to do the implementation. In the long run, this is actually going to cost us less than what it's costing us right now to be operating in an inefficient in an inefficient way. So yes, it's a little bit of cost up front right now, but that's going to be less than what our long-term is by what we're putting right now for all of our loss of efficiency on this.
Thank you, Kathy, and for your answer there.
You're welcome.
I still feel the way that I feel, and think that there maybe has been a reason that it continually gets pushed off, and that we all need to look for efficiencies. And like I said, I would entertain removing them both and changing that to have a motion to come back to add a person in that strictly deals with your FOIs for this year and phase this maybe in as we go forward. Just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Any other comments on this motion?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if I added for council as well that the one position is for the FOI and privacy. The analyst isn't going to be doing any of the helping. It's the manager position that would be doing the other piece of this. So,
thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, I will call the vote on this.
All votes are in. Motion fails 6-12.
Sorry, I was muted this time. Other motions from the floor. Councillor Latimer, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we take 500,000 out of the strategic development reserve. We have 3.9 million in there. I think we can reduce the tax impact easily with 500,000 out of there.
We'll get this motion up one moment. Oh, sorry. Did we have a seconder for the motion?
Yes.
Councillor Ben. Oh, Councillor Oche. Thank you. We'll get this motion up in a moment. I think I know the comment that that Gord's about to make, and we'll go to him for that.
Sorry, would you like me to proceed now, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Gord.
Yeah, you know what's coming. It's the classical buying down the tax increase from reserves that will come back to bite, I guess, the next council in the 2023 budget. You've all heard it many times before.
Thank you, Gord. We'll continue on with comments just as we get this up. Councillor Latimer, did you want to make some opening comments?
Not right now. If you come back to me, I'd be appreciative. Thanks.
Sure. We'll come back to you at the end. Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Pinsonneau.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Gord, what does that buy our rate down to?
I'll get it exactly, but it's right around the 3%.
Yeah, it's okay. Thanks. I've supported every cut thus far. I've voted against every single expenditure so far, to be honest with you. I think it's of paramount importance that we find savings in the budget. However, if I can't support this, I'm thinking about it, and I might even support. Gord, how much do we put into the strategic reserve every year?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it does vary. There's very little base dollars going into it. We mostly replenish it with one-time money. that comes along from time to time. So so the sources historically in the last 5 years, for example, I know we had some North Kent Wind funds that deposited, I believe it was around 4 million into that account. And sometimes when we have year-end surpluses, if we have year-end surpluses, after we pay off some of our other outstanding obligations, such as the Bloomfield Industrial Park, where we still owe millions of dollars, we then allocate the remaining about any corporate surplus to this account too. So that's it really has a very little base budget sources of funding.
So, okay, I'm just trying to understand. So you say very little, and I'll take you at your word. So there's very little guaranteed money year over year. See, I think what I'm trying to say is that I would be somewhat supportive of collecting $500,000 less from our taxpayers year over year, but I struggle with this one. How does this impact the 2023 budget then?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll add the 0.3% more rate from the beginning.
And what were we already anticipating? I mean, it's back of the napkin, obviously, so much can change. COVID has taught us that. But I remember on one of the first nights you had kind of a projection of what next year's tax increase was going to be.
So of course, inflation is also, we hope the long-term inflation is back down to 2% over the next 2 to 3 years. That is the Bank of Canada's goal. I am worried that it'll only be partly way there next year, and that will still be in the 2.5 to 3% for inflation on its own. And then as we've been talking all budget, we've had a huge deficit in our infrastructure. Our infrastructure gap has widened as the 5.3% inflation over the last 5 years with infrastructure has widened that gap. Our next asset management plan is coming to this council in March or April, and we'll likely turn our 1% asset management plan in something closer to 2% a year needed for that. So add that together, we're looking at 5%, 4.5 to 5% budgets for the next decade.
And then you'd add the 0.3% on from this year.
So this would add, yeah, this would make that 5.3 then.
All right. Like I said, I've been in favor of every single cut so far, but this isn't one I can support. This is taken from a savings, your savings account to pay down an operating shortfall, and that's not good budgeting. It really isn't. I appreciate the desire to bring the tax impact lower. I really do. I share it. I think that we still need to find savings, but I think this is a false savings, and this only hurts the next council. I mean, I know we all want to be on the next council, but this isn't the way to do it. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've asked this question year after year. As Councillor Thompson just mentioned, if we take from our savings to pay down our operating expenses, now, as a homeowner family guy, isn't that what savings are for? If you have a ton of money in the bank, don't you use it when it's needed? And again, I've asked this question, I've received the same answer for many years, but to me, I think, yeah, we've got a tremendous reserve fund, and Gord, you could probably tell us how much we have in total reserves. And I'm sure that you may not have that information on hand, and that's okay. But if we do have this incredible amount of reserve money, why not use it to lower the burden on the taxpayer this year? And this of all years, not that it's the worst year in the history of mankind, but with COVID, which I'm getting so tired of even saying that word, but there are stresses. There are stresses on individuals, or stresses on households. So if we can reduce what we're sitting at, like almost a 3% tax increase, somewhat by using some money like in the bank, which is where it is, then I'm all for it. I think we should use it. The money's sitting there, it's collecting probably nominal interest. I think it's a good use of saved money. And the taxpayer, I'm sure, would consider this a logical, not solution to a tax increase, because it's not, solving a tax increase. But if we've got all sorts of money in the bank, why not use it in one of these challenging years? And every year is challenging, I know, but these last 2 years have been more challenging to most than almost others in memory. So I'm all for this. I think it's a great idea. Let's use $500,000, and maybe Gord, if you could answer that question of what is our total reserve fund? Total.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tab 9 of your binder has the list of all our reserves. There's approximately 190 million listed in those reserves, but except for that strategic reserve that we've already talked about, most of the others are set aside by council already for specific purposes. If I can give 2 analogies, like that a homeowner might make sense to them. This is taking your savings that you set aside to fix your roof and using it to pay your utility bills, or perhaps this is taking the money you set aside to buy your next used car and paying for your gas bills. Taking money that you set aside for that next capital purchase and paying your operating costs.
And I understand that, Gordon. I've heard it year after year, and I appreciate it, and I do. And thank you, Mr. Chair. What I do understand, if we have $190 million in reserves, that a lot of it's been earmarked for different projects, and I understand that. But those projects, some of them are years away, and maybe those projects won't be done, or they'll be funded in different ways. But we're talking about today, we're not talking about years from now. So, to explain to the taxpayer from our political position that we're going to raise your taxes 3%, but we have $190 million in the bank, and we're asking for $500,000, and percentage wise, I'm not a real good math guy, but that's pretty small percentage. Sure. If I'm Mr. Michael Bondi, who needs a new roof, and I have money in the, I'm going to use the money in the bank to pay for my necessities of today, and I'll worry about the roof when the roof actually starts to leak, not because I might need a new roof. So anyway, Gord, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's it. I understand the thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. So just to continue with the roof analogy, I think it's important to note that when we take from reserves to offset a tax increase, we might be quote unquote saving today's taxpayer, but we're actually charging tomorrow's taxpayer double, right? And in some ways, it's not necessarily about the total number of reserve amount that we have to think we have this really large number. Some of those reserves were legally mandated to have, and we are legally mandated to spend them only in one category, which is not kind of general taxation as a base. So it's really important that we think through this decision. I also wanted to call out that as a municipality, we have a very strong debt to reserve ratio, and that puts us in a position as a municipality to be stable, to be very solid financially when we look to potential lenders, or as looking at our own credit. And the BMA study has shown that we've really highlighted in that area. But if as a council we get in the habit, or we become tempted to pull from those reserves just to offset a tax base, for really an amount that'll be asking Gord what the average house payer would be saving from this, which means they'd pay double that next year. It's really not worth it, aside from the 3 weeks of being able to tout, here's this great number that sounds a little bit better than what the tax base currently is. So Gord, I'm just wondering, if this were to pass, what would the average savings be per average tax household?
I I just asked Steve for that. It'll just be a second.
Just while we're waiting for that number, Councillor Pinsno, I had you on my speakers list and I saw your hand go down, so I had removed you from the list. I just wanted to double check that that was okay, or check in to see if you did have a comment on this item.
My question was whether that was base funds or supplementary funds, and it was answered. Thanks.
Okay, great. I just didn't want to miss you. Thank you.
And just while Gord and Steve are getting that answer, I'll rephrase my question because it's not really about how much today's taxpayer is saving. I'd like to know how much tomorrow's taxpayer has to pay if this motion gets approved, because that's probably a better way to frame it.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So the impact of a $500,000 cut on the budget on the average household would be $8.86.
All right, thank you. And I think that kind of just speaks to, what the impact could be for these kinds of conversations. Oftentimes when we think in millions or hundreds of thousands, it seems large, but when we think about our tax base and how that's spread out over our tax base, it helps to keep things in perspective.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. I have Mayor Caniff, followed by Councillor Solomon, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just I know that over the year I really try and avoid just pushing forward the problem. This motion just takes it out of this year, and next year, all things being equal, it'll be 0.3 something higher next year that we're looking at. If we keep doing that, it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. As well, the strategic reserve, we talk about, there's 4 million in it, but the examples that we're using this year, the tennis court, if we had zero in that, we wouldn't been able to do that and help that out, do that public-private partnership. Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, when they're asking for some money, that's where it's going to come out of, and that's going to be another big thing for the community. So those reserves that are unspoken for are there to help out with those other projects that we need to do. So that's where I really don't want to push it out to next year, this problem. If we're going to do some cuts, let's do some meaningful cuts that cut operational costs, not just a one-time fee. I certainly am not going to support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Solomon.
Well, let me be very practical about this, Mr. Chairman. We started off the evening at 2.99%, and we added in an amount that wasn't recommended by administration that could well have gone till next year when we were in a position where we would be back to normal, being back to normal and receiving an amount from the casino alone that would cover that expense. And I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that our casino revenues are so far down that if they were just to get back to normal, we'd be receiving, I think the estimate a couple of years ago was $1.6 million. We got nowhere near that last year, and we're not going to get that in 2022. So I think why we're placed in this position of having this motion before us is because we added money that could have gone for another year. Now we talk about when you take money out of reserves, you just pass it on to the next year. But we can make decisions to defer operational spending for a year, and we wouldn't be faced with this motion right now. So I don't like to do it the way this motion says, but I don't see how we have much choice after having added in a large amount. We could have gone another year. We added an amount that, if you look at it as a householder, the analogy that Gord used, if you're a homeowner and you go to your financial advisor and she says, oh, you can't afford to do that this year, and you still go ahead and do it, well, that's what we've done by the motion that went earlier and added money back in. So I don't want to do it this way, but I think it's being forced upon us by the earlier motion. And the bottom line of it is taxpayers cannot afford an increase that has a 3 in front of it. Now, the average, to say that 500,000 only adds this much to an individual tax bill, well, that's one way of looking at it. The other is, if it takes what should be a 2% increase up into the 3s because it's 500,000 plus the other amount that was added in earlier, and we don't do this, it adds, I would ask then, well, what does a 3.2 or 3% add to a house whose assessment is 400,000? And I know I'm going to be told, oh, the house that's 400,000 today was probably only 175, 176 back in 2016, the last assessment date. But somebody's going to get an awful rude awakening because of our house price increases come the next assessment period. So I don't want to reduce the tax percentage this way, but it's forced upon us by adding money in earlier this evening that wasn't recommended by council or by his staff after their long deliberations. So I see no way that I can't vote for this. It's a neat thing to say you're passing on expenses to future councils, but we could have deferred expenses to the next council when more money was coming in. And we know that with all the building that's gone on, the actual new assessment and back to that casino money, we'll be in better shape next year on revenue, on the revenue side. Those are my comments. And while it's not my preferred way of doing this, I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Gord, did you have a comment on the budgeting for the casino revenue?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so that everyone, and this doesn't take away from everything that Councillor Solomon said. There's a lot of good points that he made in that. I just wanted to clarify where we're at with the casino. Yes, we do have somewhere between 1.5 and 1.6 million in the base budget. You'll remember that from it was either the 2019 or 2020 budget where those new funds came in. The shortfall through the COVID years of 2020 and 2021 have been covered by the provincial Safe Restart funding. So it had a net zero impact, but we still have the 1.6 million in the base. We did not lower the base for the casino. So of course they were closed for the month of January. We're hopeful that they meet their budget targets over the next 11 months and come in close to meeting their total budget, but that we were made whole for 2020 and 2021 by the Safe Restart funding from the province and federal government.
Thank you, Gord. Councillor Finn.
2022.
Just some comments. I'm in agreement with Councillor Solomon. We have no choice this year. We're adding stuff that isn't recommended. But my concern is we approve hiring people out of reserve. We approve hiring equipment out of reserve. How does that not affect our base budget next year? And nobody sees any problem with our EMT approving this. I've never been able to understand it. I don't have an accounting background. I'm sure, like Councillor Bondi, I'm going to get the exact same thing. But people are pulling from their savings. They're making decisions whether to buy food or pay hydro or pay rent. So I don't think we have a choice but to take it out this year. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. And I know that Gord has answered the question before, but when there's items that are supplementary in the budget, so the S in the 1, 2, 3rd column over, when there's an S there, that's a 1-year expense. Often we've heard when that's a staff member, that's a temporary position. So since it's only needed funding for 1 year, it's funded for 1 year, and then it's not an ongoing expense. The same with capital projects or things like buying a vehicle. They pay for it once, so it's a one-time expense, and that's why it comes out of reserve. So things that are ongoing expenses, so every year, if they're taken out of reserve, it essentially means that someone has to find that money or collect it from the taxpayer just in the subsequent year. So if we close the analogy that Gordon mentioned in using your savings that you were going to use to repair your roof to pay your ongoing utility bill, the issue is in the next year, when you don't have any money to fix your roof, you also have to increase your expenses to pay your utility bill. So not only do you not have money in the bank for the roof, but you still have to now find money to pay your utility bill because you don't have the income to pay it anymore. So that's the difference in the one-time and ongoing expense. Do we have any other comments on this motion? I don't see any other hands. I'll let Councillor Latimer comment last. I'll make a few comments before. I haven't supported doing these types of moves in the past. I think in years 1, 2, or 3, one could make an argument that when we do something like this, it would be the same council that's responsible to find those savings in the subsequent year. This is year 4. So it's not our responsibility to find these savings or recover this money in subsequent years. It's going to be the next council. So I think that this is not finding savings. This is just asking future somebody to pay this expense because we don't want to pay it this year and we're not willing to find the savings somewhere else. Cynically, I can think of some reasons why people might want to do that in year 4. And I think that that's a tough conversation to have with taxpayers, to mention that we save them money in year 4 or costing them money in the next term of council and have no plan on how we can save that money for them other than just pushing off that responsibility to someone else. So I certainly understand the need that people feel to look for savings, but just as a reminder that this isn't savings. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Latimer.
Thank you. Listen, I'm all for reducing operating costs. And I actually had a motion in front of this council, which was defeated, to bring that information from administration. And it was due to the fact that our information from the customer service review isn't back. It's expected to come shortly. And there is anticipated, streamlined services being implemented and associated cost reductions. There's also, with the staff hires that we are supposedly passing here in this budget, that is also ultimately supposed to reduce our full-time equivalent and increase our efficiencies, ultimately decreasing our operating costs. I think we just run out of time. And I don't like doing this. I don't like adding onus onto next council's first budget. But if any other council member come up with another way that we can reduce this tax impact, I'd be more than glad to listen to that. But I haven't heard anything. And I do know that we have to reduce this tax impact because people are in the position of they can't afford the new roofs, they can't afford food or gas. So I am hoping, I think we've placed ourselves in this position, as Councillor Solomon said, and I am truly hopeful of the operating cost reductions. And I will be, as I said, I'm bringing forth a motion with the help of Kathy Hoffman and EMT at our next open council meeting, because reducing our operating costs in 2023 absolutely has to happen as well as reducing our infrastructure inventory and hopefully setting the stage for more successful financial, or more a rosier financial picture for the new council in 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. I'll call the question.
Motion fails 7-11.
Thank you. I know we've got another couple motions coming. I have one from Councillor Hall, one from Councillor Pinsonneau. So before we get to those, because I anticipate we're going to go longer than another 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll see everyone back here at 8:30. So we'll get going again. I have Councillor Hall and Councillor Pinsonneau both with motions left on my list. Councillor Hall, I know, has emailed. Well, we'll do his motion first. Councillor Pinsonneau, if you have the wording for your motion and you email it in, we'll just get it up quicker once we get to you as well. So with that, we will start with Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll refer council to tab 5, line number 86. I move that $200,000 be removed from the market rate review item for 2022 and that the project be phased in over 5 years instead of 4.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor C. McGregor seconded. Councillor Hall, did you have any, while we get this up, do you have any comments to begin?
Well, I'm just cognizant of the fact I know there was a presentation in closed session about this item. So I'm just a little unsure about what type of comments and discussion can be had in open. So maybe I'll pass it over to Gord for comment on this. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Gord, if you can make some comments that would be permissible and open, just to remind council of what this is in a way that's permitted and open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I think I'll defer this to Kathy Hoffman.
Thank you. Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of the conversations that we had in closed session with respect to our compensation and labor relations strategies for the next 2 years. And so certainly I would probably just leave it at that right now for discussion. And if you did need to ask additional questions or would like some other dialogue about that, we could certainly prop council up to reconvene in closed session if you wish.
Thank you. And a good reminder that this was something we discussed, that was discussed and closed through a presentation, but based on the line item, it still can be altered in open session. Was there any other questions, comments around this motion? Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's the clerk.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention that I believe this is the line that we had 4 conflicts on before. And so I just wanted to clarify that. Perhaps Kathy could clarify if that is the case.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the conflicts that were articulated in closed session on this item would stand on this one as well. If council needs me to review my recollection of who claimed conflict on that, I can certainly do that. Otherwise, they can each do it on their own.
Okay. I will start if it is one of the items from closed that had the conflict item, community interest for things pertaining to non-union. And I believe there's 3 others. Councillor Crew, you wanted to make the same noted. Mayor Caniff would be noting the same. And who was the 4th? Could you remind me, Kathy?
Councillor Pinsonneau.
Councillor Pinsonneau. So the 4 of us would be unable to vote. So I will pass the chair momentarily to, just looking for cameras. This Councillor Hall's motion crew to Councillor Harrigan. If you could chair this question, thanks.
Yeah, happy to, Councillor McGregor. Are there any questions or comments about the motion as it sits in front of us on the screen?
Madam Chair, could I just ask one clarifying question? It's Kathy Hoffman.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm wondering, actually, I believe what the motion up here says to be phased in over 5 years instead of 4. I believe actually that we had indicated that it was over 2 years. I just wondered if we could double check that, Gord, if you could just confirm if I have that right or wrong, please.
Kathy, I think it was, I think originally EMT debated a $2 million item per year for 2 years, and then reduced it to 1 million for a year for 4 years. This would reduce the line to 800,000 a year for 5 years. So I believe the motion's correct.
Okay, thanks, Gord, for clarifying. Any further questions or comments about the motion? All right, seeing none, then we will call the question.
So I have all votes are in and the motion passes 11-3.
All right, thank you. Back over to you, Chair McGregor.
Thank you. Councillor Pinsino, we were to your motion next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little clarification on tab 9B, line item 123. It's the transit for the increase in accessible, partially funded by revenue, but it's got a $181,000 price tag on it.
Thank
Is
you,
there anybody
Councillor
that can
Pinsino.
speak to that?
Yeah, if you ask your question, we'll direct it.
Okay, well, my question is, I know the rural transit, there's basically very little usage. Now, was there a study done or something that justifies increasing this transit by that much?
Gord?
So I'm just going to start on just reminding council that this is area rated to where the usage is. That's what the T ranking is. So it has no impact on where we're at as far as a tax increase. This is only passed on to the areas that get the service. But the rest of your question, I'll refer it over to Thomas Kelly to answer.
Actually, that's okay. It's area rated. I didn't catch that. So we're good. No more need. I do have one more, Mr. Chairman, if
floor is yours, Councillor Pinsino.
Okay. I did the same motion last year and I'm going to try it again this year. I'd like to move that 300,000 savings be found through service review as we did last year. And if I get a seconder, I'll explain that.
Seconded by Councillor Finn. Go ahead, Councillor Pinsino.
Okay, so this budget's going the wrong direction tonight. And again, we made it work last year, and I'd like to see another 300K come out of here. We got to start moving this number down, and that gives us the whole year to figure out where that money's going to come from, and administration can bring recommendations for it, but it gives them a period of time to figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinsino. We'll get that motion up. And while we're awaiting that on the screen, we'll go to questions from the rest of council. So I have Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Foss. Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Budget Chair. Isn't that just line 87 where we tried to do it last year and failed? That's kind of how I read that.
Don, go ahead. Don, you're muted, sorry.
I was gonna say, I'm not hearing him.
Sorry, I have a double mute, my friend. Sorry, thank you. Last year, Councillor Pinsono's motion had an additional caveat that there could be no impact on service reduction or no service levels. And I think that put us in a real bind, and we really struggled with it. If the direction is that we have the flexibility to adapt on a service level, then that makes it a whole lot more doable from an administration standpoint. But that virtually everything in our budget is tied to a cost, whether that's a staff cost or an equipment cost. And if you reduce those costs, unless it's based on efficiencies, it's very difficult to do without impacting a service level. So, Gord, I'm not sure if you have anything else with respect to last year's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Gord, did you want to add to that comment as well?
No, Don said it correctly.
Great.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Latimer, go ahead.
I'd like somebody to explain how this is different than what I've been asking for since before Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, it is no different. The way this is worded is that 300 be removed from the base budget through service reviews. Okay, but we don't know the recommendations of the service reviews yet because they're ongoing. As service reviews come in, we bring them to council. Sometimes council doesn't like where we're headed with a service review and wants to have input on whether those changes are made or not. So this really becomes impossible to do unless a service review is completed during the year and comes to council, and council approves that the service alteration or service reduction or whatever the recommendation of the service review. This could be about closing facilities. This could be about less staff. This could be about a lot of things, but we don't know that until the actual service review comes. So it's putting the cart before the horse. Ideally, service reviews would come throughout the year to council. Council will then have their say on that service review, make decisions on what parts of it are approved or not. And then any savings from that would come forward to the next budget year, because often there are months of transition plans, or, if staff were being laid off, there'd be one-time cost, and it really is not a savings within years. So I would highly recommend that council not do this. And if the goal is to cut more from the budget, pick the service or item that you'd like to actually cut, and because this is a motion like this really doesn't have any. It's easy to pass because it doesn't say what service is going to be cut, but and not that I'm trying to prejudge a service review. There's many being done right now, and this could be affecting any of your services, and you're making a cut in the budget without knowing what the impact really is.
So I didn't misunderstand, Gord, and I recognize I'm impatient. And I know exactly where Councillor Pinsono and every other councillor is going on this council tonight. I so wish that we could identify part of our operating costs that we could take that $300,000 from this evening. But I've come to realize through my discussion with Kathy Hoffman and Gord and Dawn and Darren, especially with regard to community engagement, that we cannot do this prudently, just by directing administration to take $300,000 from the base budget without further direction. I anticipate that we may be able to find this before the end of this year, but again, the savings will be realized in 2023. And I'd love to have been. That's what I wanted to put forth here. And I've been stonewalled. Not so stonewalled isn't the right word. I've chosen to stand down each time, because what administration has come back to me has made sense. So in principle, I'd love to support this, but logistically, I don't know how you're going to do it. That's what I'd want to know, what would be involved if we pass this tonight. And I think Gord's explained he can't tell us.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. And I think that that's well said. And I think that a component of that is the work outside of this committee during the council year. So those type of directions, if we do want to alter a service level, those motions can be made when we give budget direction. When we gave budget direction, I believe in May, that would be a component of budget direction. It could be that we want to see $300,000 in savings through service reduction, and then we would know what we were voting on when we got to budget with that. So I think that's I know we are in year 4, but that's a good learning point that those types of things may be most appropriately done outside of this committee and at council, so we have that information when we come here, if that's a direction we're anticipating we need to go in. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not directly related to this question, but just hoping for an update at where the tax increase is at the moment.
$3.14.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this motion? Councillor Foss, sorry, I was scrolling through to see your camera. I see your hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Okay, thanks to Mr. Chairman. Last year we had a summer motion that passed. Am I correct on that? And we were not able to find the reductions. Am I correct in that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As part of the difficult 2022 draft budget and the formation of it, in the end, we did identify on a slide on opening night a host of items that actually added up to more than 300,000 that we've recommended for savings in this draft budget. In fact, it was close to $1 million of savings actually come up with. However, a lot of those are difficult. Some of those were one-time things, and some of them are very difficult things. I can think of the reduction of 3 staff from our base budget at public health, for example, as one of the ones that was in that list. That so yes, so we actually. So no service reviews were completed during the year that had savings. There were service reviews completed that had that looked at services, might have made efficiencies, but didn't have a tax savings to bring forward to council. You know, we would rather have, you know, what direction is you know, and I definitely don't want to start naming things in the ugly lists that we've done in the past, but it really comes down to, well, where would you like this service reduction to be? You know, we have, as administration, brought several things to council over this term of council. Thomas Kelly, I know, brought several infrastructure savings ideas that would accomplish this type of goal. But council has rejected those. We did not move forward with those savings. And of course, we have a life cycle plan that's only partially funded anyway. So like it's, I'm sort of relating it back to the 0.4% divestment type of thing, where this is council saying one thing, but then when it comes, but we have no idea whether they're going to enact what comes when it comes later, right? So it's a much better process that council makes decisions during the year that are brought forward to the following year's budget for implementation. And if you'd like to go, if you'd like to task us with more service reviews with recommended savings for the 2023 budget, that's fine. That's something that would come at a regular council meeting with ideas on what you want us to look at.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I was going with my question, I guess. I know that administration has brought several recommendations, as you mentioned, Gord, to find efficiencies and savings, and because there was no political flavor to do that, they weren't approved. So I'm looking at this 300,000, and I don't think that unless there's something specific that council is going to support, I can't support that motion. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Did we have any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, I will. Oh, Councillor Salmon, you got in under the call. Go ahead.
Obviously, my fingers just aren't quick enough. I just have a question through you to Mr. DeGord. If this motion passed, and at in September of 2022, you did not find you didn't find the $300,000 to be removed from the base budget, although you had a budget surplus like I've seen every year for 25 years. Wouldn't that, and if it amounted to 300,000 or more, wouldn't that have the same impact? You would just have to have a report that said the $300,000 couldn't be found through service reviews, but we have surplus that will apply to that number. Am I somehow wrong on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. So it's a little 2 points. One, it's like the one-time money. This is a base budget cut, and you're talking about annual potential one-time surpluses. So it's again about one-time money versus this is a base cut that we have to find ongoing savings. And secondly, where in some years we've had surpluses with our COVID years and with our Safe Restart funding help, we've actually had deficits in both 2020 and 2021 that were able to get to zeros. No deficit, no surplus, only because of being bailed out with the Safe Restart funding from the province and federal government. So we're not projecting a 2020 or a 2021 surplus because of the COVID impacts. But if we did have but what you're really saying is we would try to handle this through even if there wasn't a service identified, we would try to handle this through the year-end variance. And
Yes.
if you know, if there was a surplus in the fire department or the public works department or some area, yes, that'd be great. We could get through that year and then have the discussion in the following year budget again, same as we brought it forward this year.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Gord. That's exactly what I was asking, and you cut to the chase. I thank you for that. I still remain an optimist that that we can remove monies through service reviews. It just takes a political will, and I think we've got to get some steel in our spines to do that kind of thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Do we have any other comments related to the motion? Councillor Pinsino, did you want to make any closing remarks on that?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 9-9.
Thank you. And just before we moved on, I wanted to note we seem to have a technical issue from 8:30 to 8:46. So there will be a post about clarifying that and summarizing it. Could we just have a quick summary? There was one motion passed in that period of time relating to $200,000. Could we just review what that motion was, just so if anyone's watching right now, they'll be able to see what was voted on.
Mr. Chair, it's Judy. Just let me get, Meredith's going to put it up on the screen.
Sure.
So it was the 200,000 be removed from tab 86, or sorry, item 86 on tab 5 with regards to the market rate review, and the project be phased over 5 years instead of 4, and that motion ended up passing. So that 200,000 will be removed.
Great. Thank you. And we'll make sure that there's a post regarding that as well. But I'm told that from 8:46 on, everything was working just fine. Any other motions, general motions from the floor? Councillor Foss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've been plugging away here at trying to find dollars, and we haven't been very successful in doing that. I think we've looked at every area that we can look at, and there isn't much of a flavor to look at surpluses, which I agree we shouldn't be looking at. So I'm very comfortable in making a motion that we accept the 2022 budget at a 3.14%.
Moved by Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Harrigan. Any comments, discussion, questions regarding Councillor Foss's motion to accept at 3.14? Okay, seeing no hands up, I will call the vote.
Just need 1 second, Mr. Chair, to get that in the voting system.
Not a problem.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, could we have that on the screen just so that we're...
Yeah, we're just getting that up on the screen right now, Councillor
Okay,
Bondi.
great.
We won't vote till it's up.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have it in the system and we're ready to vote now.
Thank you. I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 9-9.
Thank you, Judy. Do we have any other motions from the floor? As a reminder, rules for deliberations in this committee are different from council, so we can revisit items. Doesn't require a 2/3 vote. Councillor Harrigan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. Only because we are at a standstill, I am just going to direct us to item 4, previously approved. The mayor and council honorarium inflation rate. I don't think it's appropriate to reduce the mayor inflation rate given that it's his full-time direction. So I'm wondering if it could be shared what the council increase on inflation would be, and I will move to reduce that from the budget.
Seconded by Councillor Oche.
Yes.
We'll get an answer to that question for you. It'll just be a moment. Councillor Harrigan, if you wanted to make some comments related to the motion.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's great practice because I think that increasing the counselor stipend alongside inflation encourages, recognizes compensation principles that are often in line with other executive or leadership positions. But I think that given a lot of conversation about the difficult year we're in and some comments we had previously discussed about really wanting to look in all places, this is me looking in a bit of an uncomfortable place, but also looking, in every corner of the budget. It's one that we kind of gloss over. And so just, doing this part to keep the conversation going, because if the budget did fail 9-9, that means that obviously we're not at a place right now where we're happy with it. So we can discuss our own compensation as a potential way to improve the tax impact.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was an earlier question on another matter that was asked and said, what would the impact of this reduction or increase have on an average taxpayer's home? So I guess the first question here is, what is the amount that would be reduced? What impact would it have on an individual taxpayer's home, the average taxpayer? I guess we call it $176,000 house. And what difference does it make to the, what was it, 3.14? Was that Joe's number? I can't remember.
3.14 is correct, Councillor Solomon.
And what impact will it have to reduce 3.14? But while I still have the floor, I would like to ask a procedural question.
Go ahead, Councillor Solomon.
And that is, we had a motion earlier that added a fairly large amount to the budget. What is the process for having that just reconsidered?
My understanding in deliberations is you could make a motion without requirement of 2/3 vote.
I understand that, but can I ask, can it be, I bring a motion to have it deferred to 2023?
I understand what you're saying. We'll ask the clerk about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, so I'm just trying to understand. So there was one of the motions that was previously done. You would like to not do it this time and do it in 2023?
Where am I at here? Yes, it was a motion, yes, to defer the increase to consider in 2023.
My thought is you'd be referring it to a new council and making a decision for new council, which it would just be open game for them at the next budget. But right now you're just in committee and obviously not in council. And so right now we're just, what you move out of budget, the motion that you just tried to do to move into council is just to move the motion for the 2022 budget.
Okay, but one can't bring a negative motion either, correct?
Correct.
So, so the motion would require that the same amount that had been approved would have to be removed from this budget. Am I correct in that?
I think I need to know which motion you're referring to
It's the
understand
motion
better.
of Councillor Crew to add, I can't remember the amount of money, it was on the screen before, to the 2022 budget for EMT.
Oh, there was like
which
126
was not
and
recommended
400.
by administration, that one.
Gord, do you have comments to that with regards to where the money's coming from? I'm going to try to pull it up so I can read the motion.
Yeah, thank you. So the budget's not over till it's over, and so you can pull a vote to remove, like, yes, earlier tonight we added, council added that item. You can ask for another vote to remove that item until the budget's done. We can vote on it.
Okay.
Once again, but you can't tie the 2020, the next council's 2023 budget's hands with that, right? Like, it's either where, and just think about it, it's about land ambulance and it's about them hiring staff. So either they're hiring staff or they're not. And basically this, you would have to remove that, what we added before tonight. And if it passed, we're just not, Medivy as our contractor would not hire staff, and we'd wait till the 2023 budget to see if the next council wanted to add staff or not. So we can't tie the hands of the next council, but we could, but you're welcome to put a motion on to remove the item that was added earlier in the night.
Am I able to phase it over 2 years?
So again, this is staff. You're able to change the start date. So for example, if you only wanted half of it, if you wanted to start July 1st, we would only need half the budget amounts this year. It would still be the same base impact for next year's budget. So it would have that same causing that base deficit for next year, because you basically, if you didn't start it to July 1st, for example, you're only funding it for half the year this year, with requiring the next council, forcing the next council's hand to hire the next half to get it to a full, because once those employers are hired by Medivy, they're hired for the entire shift, I guess. They're not hired for half a shift. So you're making it very complicated on the next council to
And sorry, Gordon,
I just can't advise it, but.
And we're probably a little bit outside of just a procedure discussion around the motion. And certainly Councillor Solomon, that as soon as this motion is voted on, I'll go to you and we can clarify that procedure more if we need to, but we'll try and get back. I see we now have the motion up.
Mr. Chairman, you've got the motion. I appreciate the comments from Gord, and I will back off on that. But on this motion, I did ask to find out what the savings was, which we have on the screen now.
Yeah.
And what impact it has on the 3.14% increase from Councillor Foss's motion. And we only have, we know what the savings is, we don't know what the impact is.
Yeah, we'll get that in one moment.
Thank you.
I would say far down the rounding of the 0.000 something. So we're still at 3.14. We're just a little bit lower than 3.14.
I take it that this is meaningless then, from the percent to increase.
I won't say meaningless. It's $21,450.
Yeah, but from the percent, increase, it makes no change.
That's correct.
Correct.
It won't change. Based on the significant digits we're working with, you won't go down past 3.14 with this motion.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Rural internet is glitchy. I want to understand. I don't fully understand the motion. What's the 4807?
So I can respond in terms of the intent of the motion was to reduce the 2% for members of council in terms of their increase, but not the mayor, given that this is the mayor's full-time compensation in terms of the full-time nature of his job.
Okay, I understand that now. Thank you. But I don't agree. I don't think we should single the mayor out, to be honest with you. If we're all looking at pay raises, which we're not, I wouldn't single the mayor out for not getting one. So I wouldn't single the mayor out for not getting one at this point. I think we all make a fairly good salary. And if we're going to, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So on that basis alone, I won't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 10-8.
Councillor Solomon, you had a procedural question to review. Did you want to continue with that thread?
I did. I think the answer was that it makes no difference. It makes it very complicated if I bring a motion to have the EMT motion, that's the only way I can describe it, brought forward again and phased over 2 years. But I'll try it. So you have my motion that to bring forward I don't know how to describe it, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, because I don't have it in front of me anymore. It was on the screen. It's not on the screen anymore.
Would you like the previous motion on the screen?
If you're able to do that, yes.
So we're looking for the motion that Councillor Crew had brought related to land ambulance, the land ambulance tab from items not recommended. That's the motion you wanted to see, correct?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'd like to move that this expenditure be phased in over 2 years, beginning in 2022. That's the motion.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Finn. Councillor Solomon, maybe a question to yourself. Actually, we'll go to Gord first. Gord, go ahead.
Might have been the same question that you had. Just explaining what this really does is we can still. I think what we're saying is we're delaying the start of the increased level of ambulance enhancements to July 1st. And that you would, that the amount needed of $578,000 then gets cut in half. We could still fund the first $126,141 from the remaining amount in the assessment growth reserve, with the remainder added to the tax base. The amount from reserve would just be cut in half because it would not start July 1st. And but I'm only, it would move the other half because we'd be doing it for a full year for 2023. You'd be putting this as a must, no choice to do onto the 2023 term of council. So is that your understanding, Councillor Solomon?
Councillor Salmon, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay. My view would be that the line 4452,177 added to the tax base, which is the part that impacts our current percentage tax increase, if I'm correct, Gord, would be reduced to a lower number because you wouldn't be starting that until halfway through 2022. So whatever that number would be subtracted from the tax base, and thereby further reducing the 3.14. Frankly, not that I'm going to get down to a number that I'm going to be happy with, because it won't be under 3. Would that be the impact?
Yeah.
The amount coming out of the reserve doesn't impact the 2022 tax base. It's the other number, the 452,177. Correct?
Correct. I think the question is, we do have $126,141 in the assessment growth reserve base dollars. Did you want that entirely used up first? Because then it makes a larger difference to the tax base request.
Explain to me how we can maximize the
you want to maximize the decrease. So
yes.
We have 578,318 that we need, minus the 126,141. First, sorry, yeah, 578,318 is what we need for a full year. First, divide that by 2. We actually, if we didn't start this service till July 1st, we only need $289,159, and then subtract the 126,141. We would only need $163,018 of tax-based funds this year, rather than the 452,000.
Which when you subtract
so it's
that,
actually a savings of $289,159 to this year.
Yeah.
Divide by 1690, which is a 0.17%, over 0.17%. So gets us approximately to 2.96, 2.97, somewhere in there.
that's right, and that's my goal, and I can't. It may not. That is so complicated. I may not be able to enunciate in words, but that's my goal. Right.
So, Councillor Solomon, it sounds like that you've got clarity from Gord on what those numbers would be. Now, it'll probably, I imagine, take a moment to get that motion put together. So we will continue on with discussion, and then we'll have that motion put up, and Councillor Solomon, you can confirm once it's up if that reflects what your intention is.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Did you have any more comments to open, or would you can we move to the next speakers?
No, I'm just trying to get us to the right number. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Mayor Caniff, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If Councillor Solomon's open for a friendly amendment, I'm trying to look at next year's council and say, how can we be friendly to them? I'll call it, for lack of a better word, that what we do is the $89,000 that carries over to next year, that we, assuming that the assessment growth reserve generates at least that we use it for that. Given that that's what the assessment growth reserve is to do, is to cover off increased costs of services due to population growth, et cetera. So I think that if you want to put that in there to say that we would build the 289 in there, Councillor Solomon, if you're okay with that, then as long as it generates a positive amount of 289, there's no impact to the budget for next year for council.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to respond? My
Yes,
only
thank you.
concern
Yes.
is reducing this year's budget by 289,519, which has an impact of reducing the increase in this year's budget to the number we talked about earlier, which was 2.9. If that's, I know there's some rounding numbers, but so if Gord could confirm that that's what it reduces it to, then that's exactly what I was trying to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. And then,
and I agree with, if that reduces it, as I've just set out, then I agree with the mayor's suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just having budget staff confirm whether that whether I'm exactly at 2.96 or 2.97. So we'll get back to you in a second after the next questions.
And then we just require some wording from that amendment from Mayor Caniff that was directing that money in the future be from the.
Well, I do have an issue with that, and just as
Okay.
a procedural thing,
Go ahead.
I don't know how much growth we're going to have in 2022. I think amazing growth. From what I see with the building permits and not everything happening, I think we'll have amazing growth in 20. But you are the issue I have just in concept with the mayor's amendment is that I don't know if we're going to have growth right now above 0.8%, so that there'll be money in that assessment growth based budget reserve for next year. I get what the meaning is. I don't think the motion's needed. I guess is really where I'm at. One way or the other, you are forcing the next council's hand on funding ambulances and not something else. And there's other things with assessment growth as well. But I personally don't think the amendment actually makes any difference to the decision tonight. Medivy will hire the staff and you will be contracted to pay the bill next year.
Mr. Chair, can I just add into that to say we start with looking at the reserve, and otherwise, yes, Gord, you are correct. We are committing council next year to 289, but the hope is that the 289 would be covered out of that reserve that wouldn't have been going into the budget to begin with, so it wouldn't have been impacted. So, but yes, if it comes up short, yes, you're right. We would be adding it to the tax base. So I just so I look and say that's the first spot you'd go. But if I'm fine with leaving it out, knowing that that's the order of operations that you're going to use.
That's going to say we can take that as advice as far as we put together the 2023 budget. That's where we're going to look first, and we don't need a motion for that.
Yeah, I'd recommend we leave it like that. Then I think for ease of the motion on the floor.
And I'm the one bringing the motion, so I'm quite happy with the wording that's on the screen right now.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon.
Did I get a seconder, by the way, Mr. Chairman?
You did. I called one out. I don't recall whose name I called it.
Councillor Finn, I believe.
Councillor Finn. There you go.
Thank you.
Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Chief Case still on the line? I would like to know the impact of this change.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. Purely a matter for council, you set the level of service. The only point that I wish to make, the only 2 points I wish to make is I'll reaffirm the fact that this was not recommended on the fact that it's not legislated. And secondly, this was based on an assessment of our needs in 2020. So this is the 2020 service review that was brought before council at the end of the summer of 2021. And over 2021, we have not seen any slowing down. So if there's any consideration that this is a situation that has grown over the past year, we are going back 14 months to the needs assessment, which brought about this recommendation. Aside from that, Councillor Crew, I've got no further issues I can add.
Thank you, Chief. I'm not going to reiterate everything I said earlier. I'm not going to support it, but that's all I have to say. I hope council sees the value in protecting our community.
Thank you, Councillor Crew. Sorry, Gord, you had a comment?
Yeah, just we have confirmed that it's 2.96 is where this motion will take us.
Thank you, Gord. Councillor McGregor, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me this time?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I got my mics on. Who knows? Okay, I'm just curious with this, why this has to affect next year. If we lower the amount that is going, and in the earlier conversation was that it was going to supply extra ambulance for a 24-hour shift and an additional 12 hours. So if we lower the amount, why can't it just be a lower amount of hours that are added to this? Why does it have to be pushed forward onto the next budget?
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. The motion, as it's read, just doesn't reduce the amount of service in the recommendation. It just changes the start date. So it's just moving that to start later on. So we're committing to this year paying for 6 months of service, but future councils couldn't just pay for 6 months of service. They would need to pay for 12 months of service. So that would be where that difference would be. They would have to find another amount to add to base budget, equating to another 6 months of service.
So in other words, we would need this to capture what I'm saying. We would need to change this motion to lower the service to the amount that would be covered by this dollar figure. And that way it would not impact the next budget. It would simply lower the amount of hours, but it would still provide some hours, but would lower the amount of hours. Correct?
Yeah, it would be a different motion. So it would be changing the service level recommendation. So this is recommending one level of service that, but just starting at a different date. The motion that you're discussing would be a separate motion, and that would be changing the service level in the recommendation.
Okay, so, okay, okay.
Thank you.
I'll think about that and decide whether I bring that back up if this one fails. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Harrigan, you're muted.
Getting late. I just wanted to clarify something in my mind about the ranking system, because the rank for the land ambulance service level enhancement is ranked as B1, which I understand to be under the category of should do because it's a B, and then the number 1 just points to kind of the reason or the area for why that is a should do. Gord, am I correct there in that assumption?
Yes, the executive management team ranked it as should do, but put it in the not recommended tab for this year.
Right. So I also just wanted to point out, because again, I'm not going to repeat arguments about this, the need to invest in our community, and sometimes maybe not think so much about the decimal points of the percentage of the tax increase. But this was ranked a B1. Which falls under the same category as 10 other B1 rankings in the recommended section of our budget. And also in the recommended section of our budget was contribution to reserves that council went against those recommendations as well. So While I really do appreciate Council Solomons search to find some large dollar figures, I think that simply relying on whether or not it was in the recommended or not recommended section is probably not the best way to think through this, because there are 10 other B1 items that we could look at comparatively if we wanted to continue to comb the budget. And so I just thought it was important to point that out, that staff have recommended that we put money towards savings. Staff also have recommended that we establish that growth reserve where this could have come from as well. But we've taken a bit of a different path over the course of this budget. So I want to make us refocused here, as later in budget conversations, I'm not as seasoned as a counselor, but it seems the later we go, the more we start to focus only on the numbers. And it's at this point of time in the budget now more than ever that we need to focus on the services that our community is getting as a result of some of these budget lines.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Solomon, did you have any comments in final for this item?
Yes, I do. My comment is only that at this point in time, we're dealing with people who are under stress from loss of employment, COVID times. It's really, yes, we are dealing with the numbers. That's what one does in a budget. And the other thing is that I highly appreciate the fact that particularly in municipal government, we get to have these discussions without the restraints of party politics. So when I hear a council like I just heard express an opinion, I respect that. But I think our problem is that at the end of the day, it is a numbers issue. And there are so many good things that we can do in budgets if we only had the money. The difficulty is that we don't. And in my humble view, we can't impose a tax increase as was already defeated. So we need to do something. And this is my humble effort to do it. I don't say that I'm the budget genius, but this is the only way that I can see that we can get down to a reasonable amount for property taxpayers of Chatham-Kent and still provide the service that serves enhanced.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon.
There you go.
Oh,
I'm done.
Councillor Solomon, apologies, your audio was breaking up there a little bit.
Or was it? So what did you miss?
Maybe
Hello?
maybe it was just, sorry, maybe it was just my audio, because I'm getting a head shake that you were heard by everyone else. So apologies.
Chatham-Kent? Anyways, I just, at the end of the day, I was trying to find a middle ground that we could deal with the EMS service enhancement and still respect the problem that the majority of taxpayers in Chatham-Kent have. And I don't know that, I hope this part didn't break up, that I think the beauty of municipal government is that we can have these great debates, respect different people's views, and we're not constrained by crazy party politics. So whatever happens on the motion happens. So I'm good with that, and that's my final comment.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. And I'm assured that I was the only one with a poor connection that missed a portion of your comments. So with that, I will call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-4.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I would like to put forward the motion that item 22 from tab 4 for mayor and council honorarium be removed entirely.
One moment, we'll get that on the board, seconded by Councillor Finn. So it will be an amount that is not shown in the binder right now. That so we'll see exactly what that amount is.
4807.
Thank you. There it is. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Thompson, you can begin.
Yep, I guess my only point, I think, which I kind of made off the end of the last one, was that I believe that we are all in this together philosophically, and I think that goes doubly for council. No disrespect to whoever sits in the mayor's chair, that person is the head of council. And I believe that if council is going to forego the inflationary increase, which is the will of council, or the committee rather, I accept that. And that I think that the mayor, the head of council, should lead by example. And that's the motion.
Any comments, other comments related to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-4.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I'd like to clarify one thing on that.
Sure.
Could you have Gord check to make sure that someone else's increases in there as well? That seems a little high, so I don't want to cut anybody's weight increase that would otherwise be in that number.
Thank you, Mayor Kenoff. I think I know where you're headed, but this should just be for council and no staff related in here. So
I just wanted to confirm that because that number seemed, the 4807 seemed too high to me. So you take 110,000 times 2.5%, that's 2,500. That's 3,000. So there seems to be $1,800 in there that shouldn't be there. But anyway, I leave that to you, Gord.
Steve has just a point to make there.
Thanks, Mr. Budget Chair. So council and the mayor are actually tied to CPI. So the increase is 3.4% plus the labor burden on that. So the amount that's in there is only for the mayor's compensation at this point.
Thank you for the confirmation. Just want to make sure that we didn't impact anybody else.
Yep. Councillor Sakachi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. I just like Gord to turn to tab 5 item. I know we're going it's just a drop in a bucket, but tab 5, line 75. It'd be page 3 of 7 on tab 5. Gord, can you just speak to the corporate provision fuel at 2%?
I think I'll have Thomas Kelly speak to it, but I'll just first point out that this was submitted by the fleet area back in July when they were forming their budget ask. As you know, with the price of oil skyrocketing to $90 a barrel now, and fuel headed to $1.50, things have drastically changed since this was submitted, and we probably really need about 3 or 4 times more than this. But Thomas, would you like to speak to it?
Actually, Gord, before Thomas speaks, that's somewhat of a beneficial clarification, but I also noticed in our reserves that we have a fuel price fluctuation reserve that has $700,000 in it. So I mean, well, I appreciate that we're pinching pennies here. I don't think I really need any more definition from Mr. Kelly, but I am going to move that this 43,153 from line item 53 comes out of the fuel price fluctuation reserve. I know it's a drop in the bucket, but if we're going to start looking at pinching 36 cents per household, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the asking and go for as many lines as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that motion from Councillor Sakachi? Councillor Pinsino? While we get that up, that'll be a pretty straightforward motion. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, once we get this motion up, we'll be voting. Gord, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder to council that this is one-time money coming from reserve. The ask was a base ask. So yes, it would help us out this year, but with the assumption that fuel prices are going up to stay a bit, the base ask will have to come back in next year's budget.
Thank you, Gord.
And I just wanted to add one comment to Mr. Chair. If we can't,
Go ahead, Councillor Sakachi.
If we can't utilize the reserve for fuel fluctuation, I think that that reserve maybe really doesn't need to be present. So I understand the comment, but $700,000 seems like a lot of fuel, and maybe we can look at the next year at our fleet aspects. And by the sounds of this budget, I think that we have to do a full overhaul and of many different aspects, including something that was mentioned several times on this council, the ugly list. And I think that if we're going to be making these challenging decisions at the end of a long night and looking at all these little different lines, that it's something that we have to consider this year and hope to find that small amount of savings for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. We'll get this motion up in a moment. Okay, we have the item up. Seeing no other questions, I will call the vote.
One more. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 13-5.
Thank you. And just an update, we're now at 2.93. Councillor Pinsino.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Tab 5, line item 36. Now, a couple of terms of council ago, when we brought in the early years program, it was funded by the province. And at that time, I believe it was Councillor Solomon said, if the funding goes away, do the jobs go away? So I guess my question is, if we pull this line item 36 out of there, what does that mean we can't do in that department?
Dr. Redike.
Thank you, Mr. Budget Chair. So I think I want to point out for council that within our childcare and early years, there are a number of lines in there. So we have brought a report to council, certainly a couple of years ago now, that indicated a number of provincial changes that were happening. This funding is not connected to the early on program, which is what I think Councillor Pinsino was speaking of. This is a change to the cost shared agreements between the province and the municipality. You will see in a couple of lines below that line that the province is providing mitigation funding this year for our childcare and earlier years programs. So the actual impact, while we have to show those in the line items in the budget, the 213,472 is in terms of the administrative expenses from 10% down to 5%. But certainly there is a sub item right underneath it where the province is giving us $425,950 to offset that cost. So I'm not sure that this would do anything. So from a childcare perspective, our numbers really all balance out. We're actually in the good at the end of the money going out and money coming in. So I don't know, Gord, if there's any better way to explain that, but
that's fair enough. That's if we're getting more from the province, then we're paying out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general motions from the floor? Councillor Sakachi, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question to Mr. Kelly. In this budget here, Mr. Kelly, was there any savings noted? I know the budget would have been presented before the closures of in January here. Is there any savings that would be found in the budget for not operating substantially through the first month of the year here?
Thank you, Budget Chair. Could you assist me, Councillor Sakachi, just with a little bit more information? Are you relating it to the snow we're having or the temperature?
Sure. No, sorry. So with the recent pandemic, COVID pandemic, there was a lot of restrictions that were in place for January that really caused some basically a significant amount of reductions in a lot of our services that we offer from a recreational standpoint. Just curious to see if and I know that there was a lot of staff that might have been reallocated other places, as well as you lost revenue, but just curious to see if any of that was taken into account. I know the budget was presented after that, but I just didn't know if there was any potential savings that we could address in that matter, if you think that there's any savings.
Thank you, Budget Chair. So your question is specific to Parks and Recreation, and
yes, sir.
Yeah, and that would, so we did have a reduction in services for the majority of January, I would say, but we went into a mode of doing maintenance on our arenas that we would typically do when we have some downtime. We also went forward and tried to reduce some of the energy costs of the arenas as well. So there will be some savings in the month of January. It's just very difficult to say, this is the budget for the entire 2022. So it's difficult to say how that will pan out for the remainder of the year, because certainly we're going to continue through to the end of March into April, and then we'll restart up our operations again in August, September. So you may be correct. It's definitely not in the budget though. We didn't have that information at the time, and that would be counted as a surplus or a shortfall at the end of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And just a quick question then to Mr. Quinton. So, Mr. Quinton, if there is a surplus, is this going to be one of those surpluses again that are just going to be allocated to a reserve line, or is this going to be something that is going to assist in the operational aspects next year?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So whether it's a surplus or a deficit, it would be part of our variance reports. We bring variance reports to council throughout the year, where one division might have a surplus with the closure in January. There might be another division that has a deficit as a result of the issues that we faced in January. And just to be clear, with if we're talking arenas, as Mr. Kelly stated, we still employed the full-time staff. We still kept the ice in. We still used the utilities, and we didn't receive the revenues from the clubs. So it's actually probably a deficit in the arena, or well, I'm sure it's a deficit in the arenas specifically for January, because the cost avoided will be less than the revenue lost. But it all come out, the basic answer though, that we'll report that in variances once we bring what happened across the entire organization together.
Thank you, Mr. Quinton. I appreciate that. Just trying not to leave any stone unturned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. So we're a reminder at 2.93 right now, and I believe I will need a motion to extend to 10:15. Councillor Bondi, seconded by, would anyone like to second the motion to extend? Councillor Crew? Any opposed to the extension to 10:15? I see no one opposed, so we'll keep going. Any other general motions from the floor? Councillor Foss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try it again. I move that we approve the 2022 budget at 2.93%.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Harrigan. We'll get that motion up here shortly. Any questions or comments related to the motion, Councillor Sakachi?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my hand was up for a different line item. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments related to this motion? Seeing no other hands, I will call the vote.
All votes are in and motion fails 9-9.
No.
Councillor Sakachi, did you have your hand up for another line item?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. Just looking for some clarification on the number utilized in tab number 5, line number 41 for the Legislative Capital Reserve Contribution Index at 3.71%. It's on page 1 of 7 in tab 5.
Sorry, Councillor Sakachi, what item was that?
Number 41, Mr. Chair. Recommended in tab 5. It would be the housing services, and the item description is Legislative Capital Reserve Contribution Index at 3.71%. Just looking for some clarification on the number that was 3.71%.
Dr. Redike?
Yeah, thank you, Budget Chair. Ray Harper is on the line. I'm going to let him explain this. I will say that this is a legislated item, but certainly Ray can provide council with a bit more information to answer Councillor Sakatchi's question. So Ray, over to you.
Ray, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, Ray, you might be muted on your headset there or on your microphone. Sorry, Ray, we still can't hear you. Still don't seem to have your audio, Ray.
Mr. Budget Chair, it's April. I'm wondering if, do you want me to?
Yes, if you could.
Thanks. So every year we are required to look at all of our private nonprofits putting money into their capital reserves. And certainly we work very hard with our private nonprofits to make sure that they stay viable and that they are able to continue providing a significant number of affordable housing units throughout all of our communities in Chatham-Kent. The numbers that we are provided come through to us. We don't arbitrarily pick these numbers, and this is a legislated cost to the municipality as a cost of doing business and maintaining our service level agreements that we have with the government in terms of the number of affordable housing units that are available in our community. So I don't see any world where council can do anything with this number, or we really do run the risk of it impacting the number of affordable housing units that we have, and then we are not meeting our legislated mandate.
Thank you, Dr. Reed.
Thank you, Councillor Sakatchi. Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again to Dr. Reed. Just clarification, tab 5, line 67, in the senior services, the increased expenses to meet service delivery standards. It's not in the briefing notes.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Budget Chair. So part of what we do every year is kind of what we look at as budget maintenance. So this is a number of areas where we have some increases in dietary, some increases in some of our other kind of house side of the business, not our nursing side. And these are just increased costs within that area in order for us to meet all of our service targets.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Just a real quick, need help with this. Line 119 is engineering tech 1. We change them to an area rated. And I understand that, but it refers to line 76, but I just don't understand why there's a credit and a debit in there when, to me, it just should be a savings to the tax base. But I don't understand the accounting part of it, I guess.
Gord, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll explain the accounting. Thomas can explain the reasoning. This was a transfer of a staff member from tax-related services. So that's the savings to the taxes in line 76 and a transfer to the area rated area. Which you see the charge as area rated in line 119. Thomas can sort of explain the rationale for that.
Like then it equals 0, right? Like it equals itself out in the entries there, right?
Well,
we have a
sorry for interrupting there. Overall, it's a net 0 to our overall budget, but it's been a transfer from the tax related budget to the area rated budget.
Right.
So for example, if you live out in the country, in the county, this would be a savings to your budget and added to the transit area rated budget, such as Chatham.
Okay. And I understand. I don't need to speak on the necessity of it. I was more the accounting part of it, because when we do area rated items, that's besides the normal base budget, right? So that's where
the area rated items are listed under T for funding. Yep. So they don't affect the tax the tax change through this process.
Yes. So, but that's my question, which I don't understand, is that it's actually, if you take them, it's a net 0. But because it's becoming area rated, we should we should have on the base budget, it should be realized another 111,382 on the base budget. And maybe it is, and I'm not saying it, but the way I see it, it's netting 0.
So you'd have to put the items that are in the base budget added together, as well as supplementary budget, make up the tax rated change. And the items listed under T, while they can be classified in the same areas in the binder, would be totaled separately. So while you might see them on the same page, they're not adding to the same sum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to keep putting my hand up here. I guess I got a question for Mr. Quinton here. So Mr. Quinton, if let's say we start a new office space and we have to purchase desks for that office space, is there a reserve that we would be utilizing to purchase those desks from, or would you be utilizing life cycle funds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not have a base. We do not have a life cycle budget for office furniture, so there is no reserve for office furniture.
So any one-time purchases, you would basically just utilize right out of the budget. I'm just curious to see on line item number 98, if there was any type of reserve that we could utilize to take the work from home infrastructure. Is this not purchasing this equipment? Is that not going to be a savings, having people work from home instead of the office? Is there no other way that we can find those funds somewhere else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's actually quite a few increased costs from us quickly moving through a work from home environment. On the IT side, significant costs that we've endured, and this is one of them. Catherine Fitzgerald is on the line that could explain that line item more specifically than I can. Catherine.
Thank you, Budget Chairperson, Catherine Fitzgerald, Director of Information Technology and Transformation. Yes, line item 98, work from home infrastructure. When in March 2020, when all of our staff urgently went home, we frankly crashed in some infrastructure to be able to make that happen. As now we have found that that's becoming a more permanent thing, we need to strengthen that infrastructure and make sure that it can sustain the work from home employees that we have. There's two main line items in the budget for that, lines 98 and 99. So the 54,000 is the infrastructure. So this is the IT infrastructure required for the work from home environment. And the second one is remote support software. So with many more employees working remotely, it used to be that when an employee had an issue with a cell phone or a laptop, they would often drop it off at our service team. With the remote workforce, that is no longer possible in many cases, and that 7,000 in remote support software is a new tool that'll make it more efficient for our team to support all of these mobile devices from home. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So basically what you're saying is that it's kind of moving on the fly and having to alter our strategic plan then. All right, correct?
Thank you, Budget Chairperson. So in March 2020, we did adapt very quickly to make that happen. And we are now, knowing that this is going to be a long-term strategy for the municipality, now trying to implement infrastructure that can sustain it. Thank you.
Thank you. With those comments, I'd like to make the motion that line item 98 and 99 be taken from the ITT strategic plan.
Do you have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Pinsino. Just as a reminder that these are base budget items and taking them from a reserve is one-time funding. So functionally not different than the $500,000 take from the strategic reserve to buy down the tax rate. Just a smaller amount, I guess we could say. So we'll get that motion up and we will vote on it shortly.
Mr. Chair, if I could just speak to that while we're waiting for it to come up.
Go ahead, Gord.
I understand, of course, the purpose of the motion tonight, and the chair just mentioned about the funding base items from reserve. I just want to bring in another aspect of this is the direction of council on facility spaces. That really is one of those service reviews and future planning that council needs to make now that, and with luckily, we now have the knowledge of how work from home works, the benefits, and yes, this is one of the costs, but there are significant savings long-term based on our facility needs. But those decisions haven't been made by council yet. So where we're headed for office space may be much different requirements that council will be looking at those decisions quite shortly. But in the meantime, this is a base cost to keep the bus running while we wait for that decision. Anyway, I just wanted to make that comment.
It'll give us more initiative to make those decisions better, Mr. Quinton.
Thomas, did you have a remark?
Yes, thank you, Budget Chair. So just to further explain what Gord was stating is that in June of last year, council directed me to look at opportunities of building consolidation. And for the past 7 months, I've been doing that, looking at potential relocation of the Civic Center as directed. This particular investment is critical to that. And if we remove that, that entirely changes all of the assumptions I've been making for the last 7 months. It means that we've been trying to write the direction I've been taking, and this will be coming to council soon, is to try to right size our buildings here, especially in the Chatham area. And this is if the work from home is eliminated or diminished, that is going to significantly change that proposal. So I just wanted to make council aware this may appear to be a savings here on paper. You may lose that opportunity though with that building consolidation, which is something council has asked us to do. So that's my concern, and I just wanted to make sure that was understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Mr. Chair, for clarification purposes, there's no intent to remove those items, just to fund them from a different, from a reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Scotchy. Any other questions regarding this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Going to need a motion to extend to, I believe the latest we can go is 11. So we'll have a motion to extend till 11, so we don't have to keep making these motions. Do I have a motion to extend till 11 o'clock? Councillor Scotch, your hand's still up. Are you moving that motion? Without a motion to extend, we'll be adjourning in 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'll reluctantly move the motion.
I appreciate it and note it with reluctance, Councillor Bondi. Do you have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Kirkwood White. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed.
Councillor
So
Thompson.
I'm
we should
opposed. I'm
adjourn.
opposed. We should adjourn for the night.
Well, we'll
I
have a
totally
recorded.
agree.
We can have a recorded vote. So we'll put up a motion to extend to 11 o'clock. That was moved by Councillor Bondi and seconded by Councillor Kirkwood White.
Still waiting for 3 more, 2 more. All votes are in, motion fails 5 to 12.
Thank you. So we will need a motion to adjourn, which I will read out. This session of the Budget Committee meeting will recess until 6 o'clock on February 2nd. As per the public notice bylaw, Chatham-Kent Council hereby gives public notice of its intention to hold public meetings and adopt the 2022 budget immediately following receipt of a recommended budget from the Chatham-Kent Budget Committee. The Budget Committee also gives public notice of the need to meet in closed session at any time during the budget deliberation process as permitted by the Municipal Act 2001. Moved by Councillor Harrigan, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Is there anyone opposed? I am opposed to adjournment.